Hey guys, I thought what I would do is bring you the Mullis trial kind of, well, as succinctly as possible that I can do, so that if you haven't been watching all the lives, you can watch this, be up to date, because the jury is deliberating. So let's take a look at this case. This case is about Todd Mullis, a farmer in Iowa, and Earlville, Iowa. And what he had was a hog farm, essentially, because he had hog barns where he would get deliveries of tiny little piglets that needed heaters and these nipple feeders, which were essentially bars that had, you know, like a nipple, like a baby bottle nipple, if you will, to simulate that of the mother for these piglets, and they would raise them until they went to market, okay? So they had 2 hog barns, and he was married to Amy. They were married since 2004, but there were issues in the marriage, and Amy was a registered nurse who 5 years ago had an affair with someone at the hospital, or that came to the hospital. We never really clued in on who exactly that was. And because of that affair, she quit her job. Now, it depends on who you believe here, whether it's Todd or whether it's the prosecution. Todd will say Amy wanted to quit her job in order to be a stay-at-home mom and totally get involved in the farming. Others will say that it was something that was done because Todd was controlling, didn't want her, didn't trust her at the hospital any longer, and it was part of their agreement and their reconciliation that she would leave her job there and be on the farm with Todd. Okay, she had been, Amy, experiencing some heavy bleeding during her periods and went in for a procedure on November 6th, which was an ablation of the endometrial lining of her uterus. It's a very common procedure. It's an outpatient procedure, and she had that done on the 6th of November. On the 10th of November, the family got up. Now, the family consisted of Todd, Amy, and then they had 3 children. Tristan, who was 13. They had Taylor, who was, I believe, 11 at the time, and then Wyatt, that was 8 or 9. The family had got up. It was a Saturday, and Tristan, who's 13, went with Todd out to another farm. Well, they had his father's farm, and 2 of his brothers had farms. He would put the crops in and harvest them for his father's farm, and then his brothers and he would share chores and stuff and work on each other's farms. There was no hired hands working on Todd's farm, just his family, and if there was, someone needed to help, his brothers or his father would pitch in. They did not have any hogs at the time. Like I said, it works in cycles, so they were expecting piglets that next week. So when Todd went out, I believe it was his brother's land, he found out his nephew had been out there. The land was too frozen to do anything. So they came back, and they got back to the house at about 9:30, and that was Tristan, again, the 13-year-old, and Todd, right? Amy was in her pajamas still doing a puzzle. Now remember, it was 4 days after her ablation, but many people with that type of a procedure go right back to work. In fact, you'll hear one of Amy's friends talk about that, how she had the procedure and went right back to work. It's not, like a major abdominal surgery or anything like that. So she was doing a puzzle, and she had made breakfast, but there was some left for Todd and Tristan. So as they ate what was left there, and you'll hear differing accounts on what that is. You'll hear breakfast, and then the defense will later say that they had a piece of toast and some water. So, or the defense or one of the, it's not the defense, it's actually one of the investigators who said that there was a piece of toast and some water. That doesn't account really for breakfast, but I guess, I don't know. You can hear differing accounts of it in the testimonies. So anyway, they then decide that they're going to work to get the hog barns together because these piglets are coming next week, right? And when they get the hog barns together, what that entails is they have to get those nipple feeders put down. They have to get heaters in there because it's cold in Iowa and the pigs will die. So they put the heaters in. And then they need the light fixtures cleaned. Apparently the light fixtures above, as you can imagine, in a barn with pigs and everything on a farm in general, is going to have a lot of flies. And the flies leave feces on the outside of the light fixtures, and I guess there were dead flies in the inside. So at this time, they're discussing amongst themselves, and then kind of with Amy what's going to be done. She was going to go out with her daughter Taylor to get snow boots later on that day, but she said, what's going on? They said, well, this is what we're going to do. You know, she wanted to help, is what we're told. And so he says, well, you could come out and clean the light fixtures, right? Okay. So she had to go get changed because she was in her pajamas. She wasn't ready to do any of the farm chores. And then Todd and Tristan went out to the barns. In a little bit, Amy came out, and how she did this chore is she would stand on a 5-gallon bucket, reach up, and clean the light fixtures. Now there are fences inside these barns, and every so often Todd or Tristan would notice that when Amy was getting down or climbing up, especially when she was getting down, she would really brace herself on the fence post. And they asked her if everything was okay. She said she was a little dizzy. Now a couple of times Tristan or Todd inquired about it. Then Todd said, well, why don't you go in the house? No, she wanted to help. So this continued for a little bit until she became pretty dizzy. At that point, Todd said, you're really not helping here. Why don't you go back into the house? Okay, but before you do, you know what would really help us out, Tristan had said this, is if you get a pet carrier. Now, apparently there was a litter of kittens at the farm. Their mother died. Tristan said it was poisoning, they think. So they have this litter of kittens. They have to get things out of wherever this is that the kittens are, in the shed or the barn or the shop, I think it is. And they're worried about running over the kittens with a forklift or something else. They have to get water to these chickens and whatnot. So that's why they wanted the carrier, to put the kittens in there so they're out of the way when this machinery and stuff is going to be brought out. Now this pet carrier is in what they call the red shed. The red shed is a shed that is in proximity of the hog barns, not too far, and in proximity of the house, but the shop is there as well, you know, nearby as well. And so what happens is they say, just like leave it up there by the shop and then, you know, go in the house. Well, they worked for another, I don't know, an hour, 15 minutes, Todd was saying. And in the whole time that they were working, when Tristan was on the stand, he said that he wasn't away from his father for more than a few minutes because he went to get a drink from this hose by the shop, in the shop area or by the shop area. When he would do this, he wouldn't be able to see his father, but he said he was back very quickly. Now in a deposition, he surmised it to be about like a minute and 45 seconds, but then he said he really couldn't remember because he didn't have his phone, he didn't have a clock in any of the barns, but that was all that he did. So it was, they were saying it's a minute and a half, you know, 2 minutes or whatever. You know, and he says his father was in that barn. But now, after about an hour and a half of that, an hour and 15 minutes that they're working, they take a look out because they had to go change their boots. Now what happens here is they don't want to transfer any disease from barn to barn. So what they do is their regular work boots, they go to the shop and they take them off and they put on these like slip-on kind of muck kind of boots, right? To go in the barn. So when they come out of the hog barn, they are in the shop changing their boots. They notice at this time that there is no pet carrier, right? Nothing's there. So they're both looking, and then Todd and Tristan, it's not clear, but the father says, well, do you want to go see what happened? Or Tristan says, I'm going to go see what happened. Whatever it is, Tristan is the one that goes to see what happened. Todd is finishing getting washed up and getting his boots on. And he hears some yelling or screaming from Tristan, and then he kind of walks outside and he hears it again, at which time he runs over to the red shed and finds Amy there, crouched and kind of leaning against the door, like onto her face, onto her knees, her hands and knees, with a corn rake in her back. Now, a corn rake, for those of you that don't know, is kind of like a pitchfork, but instead it has 4 tines and they're curved up, so they curve upwards. And it's on a long wooden handle. Todd says that he can't maneuver Amy through the shed doors, which is kind of unbelievable because when you see pictures of them, there's parts that look like split plywood. It looks like you could just kick it back out. But anyway, he says because of this, he reaches down and pulls that corn rake out and throws it off to the side. Okay, so when he does that, Tristan is going to get the pickup truck. At 13, he can drive as a farm boy, I guess. He comes by with the pickup truck, but he can't get the pickup truck all the way to the red shed, so it's about 30 to 40 feet away that Todd carries Amy to the truck. When he gets to the truck, it's said that he tells Tristan to get into the passenger seat and he kind of puts Amy on Tristan, okay? Tristan, who's really shook up. In fact, when Tristan testified, he said his father told him, come on, get it together, cool it, right? So he puts him in there and with his mother like that. And then he jumps in the driver's side and starts driving. And now on the way, he's trying to get to the Manchester hospital, which is about 15 minutes away. He calls 911. Now, I'll play the 911 call and you can listen to it. It becomes very, very important at the end of this case for a reason that's pretty shocking. But you can listen to it now.
Oh, this is Todd. Hello, hello. Where are you at? On the road. Okay. What's going on? My wife shot a full pork sitting in the barn. Okay. She's not responsive. I started bringing it. Okay. Your wife is in a barn and said she's unresponsive? No, she's in a bull blocking what called corn pork. I don't know if she killed. I don't know. She was halfway out the door. I turned my son over to check on her. Okay. She's yelling at me and I'm on the ride. Okay. She was gone. Okay. We'll get the ambulance going just a second. I'm headed there. I'm about to. Okay, so you're headed to. Okay, what's the hospital? I just grabbed her and threw her in the truck. My son called her. Okay, you're headed to the hospital and she's in your vehicle? Yes, tonight. I'll wake up. Okay, just a second here. There's no pulse. There's no pulse. Just get on the phone for me. Just a second. I'm going to have another dispatcher get on. I'm going to ask you to pause. Can you pull over? I can. Okay, how about you pull over? Sir, what's your current location and we'll get an ambulance headed your way? All right. I'm going to ask you to pause. Can you pull over? I can. Okay, how about you pull over? Sir, what's your What's your current location, and we'll get an ambulance headed your way.
Oneida. Well, Brian called his new house. I can be right in Oneida, right? East Oneida.
East Oneida. Okay,
I told her, did you guys do anything? She said, there's nothing.
okay. What is your name, sir?
Mullis.
And what are you driving?
White Chevy.
A white Chevy.
I can be closer.
A white Chevy truck?
Oh, I don't know anything. She's over there. Cover her up a little bit. She has her fucking pants off. I can't get her out of this. You feel anything?
25 minutes.
Do you see anything? Feel anything?
28 bottom
We gotta get
lights in the vehicle unresponsive. They're coming to Oneida. I asked them to stop there. We've got the ambulance paged out. Can you move that way?
Can I get a little closer?
Yes, that's Oneida.
Can I go a little closer?
I've got an officer almost to where you're at.
Okay.
Okay?
I'll turn off so they can get her.
Go ahead.
I can pour it in there. I'm just east of Oneida.
Okay, all right.
You feel anything? Amy.
Okay, so what happened that she's not conscious or breathing?
She fell on a fork and I took onto a fork on her. And the old fork getting somewhere and then she was halfway out of the barn. Like I'm calling to get out and Tristan yelled and I ran over there and she's laying there. I couldn't get her out of the barn, the doors were narrow and she's not responding.
Was this like a pitchfork?
Corn forks.
Right. That's what it's
Yeah, that's kind of got a curve on it. I don't know how that freaking happened. I'm sorry about my cursing.
Okay. So is she bleeding?
I can't tell. I just, when I seen it, she was face down.
Who pulled the pitch out of her? How old
I
is
couldn't
she?
get out of the door.
How old is she?
She's 38.
Okay.
She's 38 or 39.
Okay.
She is not responding.
Okay.
Come on.
Sir, do you feel comfortable doing CPR?
I'll try anything.
Okay.
I'll try anything. I guess she's laying on the side lap.
Is she flat on the, are you able to get her flat across maybe the seat?
I think it's from the back of the truck. But she's laying on my son's lap.
Okay.
Oh my God. When I pushed on her, she got like foam in her mouth.
She's foaming from the mouth. I don't know how to get her to lay flat.
She's...
You know what I mean? She's laying across the son's lap.
Oh, she got a little blood, around the back.
Is he able to get on, maybe he can get on the floor of the truck and she can lay her across the seat so we can get her flat?
But Tristan, get out, and we lay her on the, and we have to get her on the seat. Okay. Oh, shit. No. No. Don't leave the seat back a little bit. Where's my hand? Okay, she's flat. She's... I'll tell you when I go. Trying to hold on to the phone.
Right. Can you put that?
What am I going to do?
Okay.
They're flat as I can.
As flat as you can. Hold your hand on her breastbone in the center of her chest, right between your nipples. Place your other hand on top of that hip.
Okay?
Okay. Pump the chest hard and fast, at least twice per minute, 2 inches deep. Let the chest cover all the way up between pumps, and we're going to do this until they get there and can assist, okay?
Okay.
Okay?
Twice per second, right?
Yep.
1, 2. 1,
The deputies are almost there. Okay. Keep doing the compressions until they can help and take over, okay? Keep going, you're doing fine. Keep going.
Come on, just fine. Hold. Come on. Come on. Good. Come on. Well,
Is the officer there with you, sir? Okay,
Good job. What did he do?
that's fine. Do you want me to stay on the line with you, or are you okay?
No, I can't talk to the phone.
Okay, all right.
That sounds right. I got it.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay, so you've heard the call. Some of the things, and the audio is pretty bad, but you can hear him apologize for cursing. Now, if you're in the middle of something like that, it's kind of weird unless you're really worried about how this 911 operator thinks, what she thinks of you. So I found it kind of, just in the beginning, very telling that there was something more going on there, and Todd was more concerned with how he looked. Very narcissistic, in my opinion. Okay. Long story short, the ambulance comes, a couple of deputies come, they meet, they transfer Amy to the ambulance, they get Amy to the hospital where she later dies. From that point on, you see, Todd thought, he says he thought she fell on the corn rake. So that's the information that people at the hospital and everything have, but it's very apparent that it wasn't a fall. Why? Because the corn rake has 4 tines, and Amy has 6 puncture wounds. So let's go and look at this case. That was our case, right? We have the deputies that then get the news from the medical examiner that this is a homicide, and Todd is really the main person of interest, except that Amy had been having another affair. I told you about the one 5 years ago, that ended. But in May of 2018, she started to have another affair with Jerry Frazier, who is a guy that he's the field manager of the pig operation. So he comes and I guess he inspects things or whatever he does. And he has interactions with Todd and Amy at the farm. Anyway, Amy ends up having an affair with him that was ongoing until she passed away. And so at that point, Todd is saying that he didn't know, okay? That he suspected something in July. He suspected something was going on because he looked at a phone bill. Amy was acting a little differently, and he talked to friends about it. We'll get into that, but he saw the phone bill. There's a lot of text between Amy and Jerry, So he questioned both of them about it, called Jerry, he spoke to Amy. Jerry said that they were speaking about show pigs because he was into show pigs, or his kids were. Jerry had show pigs, and apparently he said to Todd that Amy wanted her kids involved in it. Plus, there were gymnastics that were in common that Jerry's daughter did, and Taylor did some tumbling, so they talked about that. And he denied, having an affair, and it appeared that Todd was very accepting of that, and Amy denied it as well. And then, well, for good measure, because we'll go on into that, Todd does seek out a search for Jerry's wife, and then he calls Jerry's wife. Okay. So he calls Jerry's wife, and Jerry's wife denies things, as well. But later on it's told that she thinks Jerry's crazy, and she blocks him from her Facebook. Okay. So that's what we have going in, right? Todd's questioned many times. They keep telling him that the deputies and then the investigator from the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigations tries to tell him, look, you're our only suspect, because they ruled Jerry out. They ruled Jerry's wife out. Todd was the only other person that was, their subject there for who could have done this, right? And who could have had a motive would be that, well, as we'll see, Todd worked very hard on this farm. This was his passion. He did not want to get a divorce. He did not want to lose half the farm. He did not want to split up his kids. So that is going to be what the prosecution said is the motive. He was arrested on, I believe it was February 29th. Okay, more than 3 months after this. And this is where this trial started. Todd pleaded not guilty. And so here we go. On the first day, they had their opening statements, right? Let's see what we have here. So they were married 14 years. This was what was covered in the beginning of the prosecution, right? Todd Mullis charged with murdering Amy Mullis November 10th, 2018 in the first degree. This happened in Iowa. She was doing farm chores with Todd and Tristan, and she was brutally murdered with a corn rake. They were married 14 years. She had an affair before, but they reconciled. She was having an affair now, but she planned to leave Todd. He used a corn rake and pretended it was a farm accident, wanted it to appear as a farm accident. She was killed in the red shed, and it was a cold, calculating, brutal murder. After he did that, this is the prosecution's opening statement, he sent their 13-year-old son to find his mother. Then he called 911. He believed he thought of everything. He believed he could fool the doctors and law enforcement. Until the medical examiner says no. Amy had to be struck at least 2 times, and possibly 3 times with this corn rake. This was no accident. Until friends said how fearful Amy was, that Todd would kill her, make her disappear. And until an iPad connected to Todd's Gmail shows searches of how to kill unfaithful women. Prosecution said there would be overwhelming evidence. At this time, we can see Todd sitting there smirking in court, taking notes. Prosecution says you will find only one verdict fits this, the verdict of guilty. Okay, the defense has their opening statements. They say they agree with some of what the state says. Okay, that it was a vicious murder, but it's not who did it. That they're debating. They're going to show that Mr. Mullis did not do it. So they're not looking to put it on anyone else or to offer anyone else that could have done it. They are just there to show that Todd did not do this. Todd and his 13-year-old son went to another farm early, as I told you, to do some chores. Too cold to do what they needed, so they returned to the house, right? Defense goes over this in their statements. Amy and the children had had breakfast. Amy had minor surgery for bleeding problems. Amy felt cooped up and wanted to help out. Todd was going to help move pipes for the new pigs, they're called the nipple feeders. Tristan was moving the heaters, and Amy was cleaning the light fixtures. Then Todd and Tristan noticed that she was losing her balance. They said, honey, take it easy, go back in the house, but she still wanted to help. So the cat with the litter of kittens, right? Todd tells her about the pet carriers in the red shed. Why don't you get that and just leave it out there for us and then go back in the house? Tristan got a drink of water maybe 2 times. Todd remained in the hog area, and they worked for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, the defense says. He did not see the pet carrier out where, he asked Amy to leave it, so he told Tristan to go see and go get the pet carrier. Tristan finds his mother in the shed with a corn fork stuck in her back. Pet carrier is partially pulled out. It's really horrible scene. Todd cannot get her out of the shed without taking the corn fork out of her back. The doors are too narrow. They get Amy in the pickup truck with Tristan, and the defense says that she's laying across their laps. There's various descriptions of where and how Amy is in that truck. Calls 911. The other thing that Todd does say, I just want to say, he says he threw her in the truck to the 911 operator, which is really not good. They transfer Amy, where she's soon pronounced dead, to the hospital, right? 2 deputies meet up with them. They're all at the hospital, but Tristan, there was a neighbor that came on the site, took Tristan back to the farm, was to, turned him around, and Todd went on with this neighbor's father who was in the car, and the neighbor drove Tristan back to the farm in Todd's pickup truck. So there was a brief questioning when Tristan was at the hospital, because it appears that Tristan went to the hospital in Todd's pickup truck with this neighbor just for a brief time, and Todd was traveling with this neighbor's father. Okay? Todd said he thought she fell on the floor, but he says he didn't know. He found her, he just assumed that. She was wearing many layers of clothing. He couldn't tell. There was no other explanation at the time. And he remained consistent, the defense says, during all of the questioning. Tristan's story stayed basically the same and was basically what the defense is saying they said. He was questioned several times, even at CPS headquarters by a special investigator that questions children of, traumatic crimes and things. Amy had been working at the hospital up until 5 years prior when she had that affair. They went to counseling, they worked through it, and Todd, marriage was important to him, but not enough to murder. Todd continued to work to save his marriage. Jerry Frazier was a hog servicer who had a sexual affair with Amy. And he did most of his business communications with Amy. In the spring of 2018, Jerry said things moved from flirting to sexual. And he and Amy met in some places, like a hotel at some times, but we'll later find out they met mostly at other farms. Todd saw phone bills with a lot of text messages between the two. Todd called Jerry to say, hey, what's going on, man? And Jerry said, I'm just telling her about show pigs and things like that. She wants your kids to get into that. It's nothing, there's nothing going on. Todd talked to Amy, and she said that there was nothing going on, and then he called Jerry's wife, Todd called Jerry's wife, and Jerry's wife said she wasn't aware of anything. Again, she called him crazy and she blocked him from Facebook. Jerry was able to convince Todd that nothing was going on, and Jerry said Amy was more interested in the affair than he was. Everything changed after the medical procedure, that's what he says, and the iPad that the searches that you'll hear about were conducted on this iPad. That was a farm iPad. It was out in the shop. It was out in the tractors. Many people used it. Many people had access to it, and that's why we have to look at why and when searches were made. Todd's explanation about the accident is an honest conclusion, but it was wrong. And, it was an on-the-spot explanation. Everyone agrees Amy was murdered, horribly. But he tells the jurors that you will find not only reasonable doubt about whether Todd Mullis did this, but you will have no doubt at all that Todd Mullis had nothing to do with this when they're done. The first witness was Jeff Fuller, and that's Amy's brother. And he lives in Eldora, Iowa. They talk about Amy's work, right? He said Amy was an RN who left her work in order to work on the family farm. Now, Amy loved being outside. He said she loved hunting, fishing, golf, and loved people, and her 3 kids were, her pride and joy. Prior to her death, she was an RN, but she left. She met Todd after, the brother met Todd when he got out of the Navy. The brother got out of the Navy. That's when he met him in 2003 or 2004. Amy married Todd in 2004, and he thought they had a good relationship. Robert Fuller is the father of Amy and Jeff, and he remarried someone named Eileen, who's Eileen Fuller, and she will testify. Peggy is their mother, and she remarried Randy, and their last name is Munson. So Amy, right before Wyatt, the youngest child, was born, had told Jeffrey that she was not really happy. In August of 2018, the family had a lot of issues going on there. They had grandmother that was very sick. She had a fall, and unfortunately she didn't make it. She was in the hospital. So Amy and her mother and of course Jeff were out there, and at that time Amy had met Jeff and his wife outside, Jeff's wife is named Morgan, outside the emergency room exit, and she had told them both at that time, this is August of 2018, that she was going to divorce and leave Todd. Now, the grandmother passes away that same day, and they go and they have to go through her belongings and things, and she had some furniture that Amy asked Jeff if he would store at his place, because when she gets divorced, she said she needed something to start out with. Jeff says, of course. He takes the furniture, and it was stored in his garage, and still is, he says. Okay. There's another thing going on. Okay, their uncle, mother's brother, has a brain aneurysm. I guess, it was it was in October, just a couple of months after the grandmother. And so now that is up in Des Moines, and Amy's going there a lot to relieve her mother. The brother's there. The brother said he did not know about the other affair, but that he did know about a situation where Amy went to pick up her younger son from the mother-in-law, Todd's mother, and the mother had spoken very negative about her, said that she was abandoning her children, she was a terrible mother. Okay. They asked, the cross-examination, they had asked if he knew how many times Amy did visit with the uncle or did relieve the mother. Jeff would only be able to guess, so he didn't say anything. And any time that Amy coordinated visits with Taylor's tumbling, he really didn't know. October 2018, You had a conversation about Todd's mom and what she said. Did she tell you that Todd stood up for her? No, he said she did not. And were you aware of Amy's affair from 5 years ago? He says no. Up until her death, did you know that she was having an affair? And he said no. So he didn't know about the affairs at all. Next on the stand is Eileen Fuller. She's the stepmother of both Jeff and Amy. 54 years old, grew up in Iowa. Her occupation is sales and advertising, and she married Robert Fuller, their father. She has 2 children, Whitney and Zachary, and of course Robert has 2 children, Jeffrey and Amy. And they met through Amy, because she met Amy in 2002 through a mutual friend, and they would go to dances and barbecues and go swimming, and they just, had a good time together. In 2003, she met Todd through Amy again, and she also met Robert, her husband, through Amy. They got married in July of 2004. That's Eileen and Robert. And then on 9/11 of 2004 is when Todd and Amy got married. So they got married in the same year, just a few months apart. Todd and she got along just fine. She said Todd came to their farm. She would put in and take out crops. Did you know about the affair 5 years ago? She said yes, but she had thought that they worked things out. You had a conversation with Todd about 2.5 years after that affair, and you had said something like, it looks like you guys are working it out. This happened to be a Thanksgiving where everybody was there, but it happened to be just Todd and Eileen in the kitchen. And it's when she says this to Todd, it looks like you guys are working things out. And Todd says, I'm not going to lose my farm, and what I worked for is what Eileen says. 2018, the grandma died, the uncle had the aneurysm, and Amy was spending a lot of time in the hospital and helping, right? Yes. Todd called Eileen during that time, is what she says, several times, or texted. He was concerned. Amy was spending so much time at the hospital. So, mostly through text, occasional calls, but she said he would be angry and frustrated because he had a lot of work. He didn't go into extreme details, but he made it known that he suspected she was having another affair. Todd said he confronted the field manager and he asked him and Amy both. That was after seeing the phone records. She told him that she would talk to his wife, not Todd's wife, Jerry's wife. That was what Eileen said she would do if it was her. Amy, did you know about Amy and his mother getting into a fight? She said Amy went there or something. He just said that his mom kicked Amy out of the house. And cross-examination was that conversation that happened 2.5 years after the affair. Are you sure it was correct? Did you write down any names? She said, I didn't write down any names or dates. I don't know. She wasn't sure, but she said it was Thanksgiving. Amy and the kids were there. And did he love his children? Did he love his farming career? Yes, he did. August of 2018, he communicated with you about Amy being absent from the home, correct? Yes. You mentioned his plate was full, right? Crops, etc. Yes. Sounds like she was visiting without kids. She said it cannot say. He said, but when you talked to Todd, he seemed very angry and frustrated, right? Yeah. Suspected Amy was being unfaithful again? Yes. And he talked to the farm manager, correct? Yes. Did Tom feel satisfied with the explanation? She said he didn't say. And you told him to talk to this man's wife? She said, I said if it was me, I would talk to this man's wife. And the defense said, do you know if he did that? She said no. What about the argument with Todd's mother? And she said the issue was from Amy's absence from the home. They said it was the issue is Amy's absence from the home? Yes, it was. Todd tell you that he confronted his mother and said that, about what she said and did with Amy? And she said, no, I don't recall that. Okay, but you're not saying it didn't happen? No. Did he say 2.5 years ago that he does not want to, didn't he say 2.5 years ago that he didn't want to split his family up? No. Okay, the ground belongs to Amy's grandfather. He went into the land, and Todd puts in and takes out their crops. After that, there was no redirect, and there was a mid-morning break. And then Tristan, the son, took the stand. He's 14 years old now, and he said that on November 10th, okay, they had come back to the house after going out to do that chore. The ground was frozen. The mother had just finished breakfast, but there was some left. They were engaged in, she was engaged in a puzzle. The conversation began about going out to the hog barns and getting the hog barns ready. And you've helped around the farm before? Yes. So you went out around 9:30? Yes, it did. And there's photos about of the barns, okay? And he asked questions about the layout of the barns. So you can check that out. Okay, so they talk about the layout of the barns and what did you do in the barns. And Tristan says, I went out and got the heaters because it's cold and the piglets are coming, right? Your father's putting down these nipple feeders. Yes, he is. Your mother's cleaning the light fixtures. Yes, she is. And then he has concern. He's asking the mother, you know, if she's dizzy. She had mentioned that she was bleeding, and she said that she was dizzy. He asked her if she was all right, if she needed help. She said, no, I'm fine, and she continued on. But it was not long, maybe another 30, 45 minutes. She was really shaky, dizzy. It was getting worse, right? And so Tristan was like, seriously, are you okay? She was breathing a little heavy. She said, I think I can do more. But then the father said, well, just go now. Just go. We'll finish up. Go ahead. So she agreed to go, yes. And all three of you were in the barn, correct? And then when she was going in the house, they said, you know what would be really helpful if you could get the pet carrier for us. Again, Tristan tells about the mother cat being sick and poisoned, the litter of kittens. There was concerns over running them over. So he watched her, you know, walk out of the barn, and he continued with his work. His dad was in the barn. Got a drink of water in the office, maybe a couple of times. Did you leave the hog barn to go any other place? Did you do anything other than get drinks? No. While getting drinks, he can't see his dad. He says for about 1 minute and 45 seconds, but then that amount of time, like I said, changed because he really didn't have an estimate of the time because there were no clocks. He didn't have his watch. He didn't have his phone, so he could only say, you know, well, he wasn't sure now exactly how long it was, but it was about, they worked for another hour and a half or so, and then noticed that the pet carrier was not up by the shop, so they asked him, this is the cross-examination, did you see any blood on your dad's clothing? No. Did you see any ripped clothing? No. Did you know about your mother's affair 5 years ago? Yes. Did it seem to come up again in 2018? Yes. He was working on a planner back in August, and Tristan said his mother had become very upset, and so he kind of found out about the affair. His father wanted her to go back into the house, and then he found her. Now, Tristan goes on and says that, you know, his dad told him to calm down, and then that they, you know, made the little rendezvous with the ambulance, and he spoke to the deputies, and the deputies asked Tristan to take them out to the Red Barn where he could see exactly where he found his mother and a little bit about what happened on the way there and what happened, you know, on after that point where he, you know, was living with his grandparents at one point after Todd was arrested and stuff like that. So they said that, did you want to be homeschooled? Yes. Why? So you would have more time to work on the farm, and that Tristan was involved in football, but that he quit band. Now there's these 911 videos and, phone calls, And they do play those, okay, for the courtroom. And then we have Deputy Luke Thompson takes the stand. And he was one of the first deputies that arrived after this 911 call. So they said, was she able to communicate? Amy, no. Was she responsive? No. Okay, what was the defendant doing when Amy was being worked on? Well, he couldn't really remember because he was taking over chest compressions, and he noticed that Tristan was kind of in shock, and they were trying to get him away. Todd was excited, he said, talkative, not a whole lot of emotion. Then there's another deputy, Eric, that came, and he said a family friend gave Todd a ride to the hospital. That was the father of that Michael that will later testify. Tristan got a ride back to the farm with that neighbor's son, and then they took Tristan to show them, they asked him to show them the red shed. He was only with them a short time. After that, Tristan went back to the house. His deputies took photos of things in the shed and the areas around. They spoke again with Tristan and asked him if he knew what happened, and he explained that she went to get a dog carrier. She had been gone a while, so his father asked him to check. And they give him an evidence bag, and they ask him, what is it? He opens it without gloves. It is the corn rake and has the broken handle. That's how he knows what it is. Next we have the medical examiner, Dr. Rake Thompson. Okay, and he said he knew Amy as a nurse, a while ago when she worked in the ER, but he has not had any contact with her since. He explains that Amy's face had some friction injuries, and she had friction injuries on her left hand. She had contusions about the where the earrings would be and the left earlobe. She had contusions on the top of the earlobe. She had a combo contusion and abrasion. He talked about the puncture wounds in her jeans or outer coat, that she had jeans they took off that she was disrobed because they took it off, but he explained that there were punctures in her outer coat that matched the wounds on her body, and that he had received information that she fell on an upended corn rake preliminary exam, and showed the exact details and injury pattern. Contusions over the knuckles of each hand. There were 2 sets of them. It looked like defensive wounds. There were 6 puncture wounds, to the right posterior chest. She had chin, cheekbone, patella, ear abrasions, contusions. Left side of her jaw, around the ear and the cheekbone. Injuries were not consistent for the fall. How can you have 4 tines on this corn rake and have 6 puncture wounds if you fell on it one time, right? He checked the rake out. He went to where it was being held as evidence and looked at it, and he said it's not possible for a single impact. So he contacted the state medical office for the forensic pathologist, Stacy Cruz, and she did the autopsies. Cross-examination of this doctor, they asked him any way to determine what caused these facial injuries. He said blunt force trauma. The way everything was orientated vertically with the corn rake and with the abrasions and stuff was not consistent with one falling down, but there's no way to determine what it was done with, is what they said, and he couldn't at that time know, just that it was blunt force trauma. Okay, the next day, which was day 2, Terry Stainer, 56, took the stand, and she lives near Earlville. She met Amy at Manchester Hospital. Terry is an EMT unit secretary. She became very friendly with Amy, so they went out socially. They even went out on a houseboat, a house party. They were golf partners. They had lots of lunches together. Amy liked to take care of people. She liked to hunt, fish. She was a great nurse. She loved being a mom. Her kids came first, and she was even their coaches in sports. Terry left the hospital after 1 year that they were there, and she remained close to Amy, however, right? She went to another hospital called St. Luke's. But they still worked the volunteer ambulance together, and she said that Amy worked at the hospital up until 5 or 6 years before she had her first affair, and it was a deal with her husband, she said, to change her environment. So they still work the EMS together, and they asked this Terry when she met Todd. She said she met Todd through Amy, and they had a fine relationship together, but she didn't really see Todd a lot. He wasn't at many social things. He was sometimes at some of the fire things, or when she went to Amy's farm to pick up eggs, she would see him. Todd worked on the farm, and he was passionate about farming, is what Terry said. Amy told her during a golf outing that she had an affair with someone that came to the hospital often, and it came out, and then this Terry spoke to Amy and Todd about what to do. She told them about a counselor. They did go to counseling in Cedar Rapids, and Todd would reach out to her, Amy, and she would text as well. They thought they could work this out. Todd never trusted Amy again. Amy was frustrated and confided in Terry and asked her, how long do I have to pay for this? Okay. Terry says she was timed, like when she went out to Walmart to when she came back, when she went out to do something, when she came back. He was very concerned about the sexual aspects of the affair. Was it better or worse? Focused on this guy and his family. Todd felt that this man was not punished enough, so he called his wife, who was a nurse, and he told her. She can't remember whether it was a text or the phone, but sometime during the summer of 2018, Todd contacted Terry to say that Amy was acting strangely after the phone bill, and he saw all these text messages, about 120 text messages to the same number. And, well, Terry said, yeah, that sounds strange. So she was not aware at the time, but he had a conversation with Amy, and she was not aware at the time what was going on, what he was contacting, but then there was a conversation with Amy. It was a text that said, I'm in trouble, I need to talk. So she came over to see Terry. She went over to see Terry. So then Amy went over to see Terry, and she started to tell her about her affair with Jerry, and that Todd had suspected it and even called Jerry's wife. Todd suspected it due to the large volume of text messages. Amy indicated she did not know what would happen, but she did admit that their relationship was just flirting, and then it evolved, and it was a sexual relationship now. Did you have additional conversations about this? And Terry says yes. Amy was not sure what to do, maybe just stick it out. Jerry's in the same boat, doesn't have it figured out. The very first day that Amy told Terry this, Terry said, I was so angry, and I said, Amy, you're in danger, he's going to kill you. And they said, why would you say that? Terry said, Todd's a person you don't mess with. And at this time, when you look at Todd in the courtroom, he's smirking and smiling like he's almost happy that he's got that reputation. So Todd said that Amy was moody and crying. The friend said she didn't see it, and she felt that it was more about Amy being scared to lose Tristan, because Tristan and Todd had become very close. Prior to that, Tristan was really close with Amy. In fact, Amy was taking him on golfing outings, and he's a very soft-hearted, kind child. So, it was bothering her. And Todd started acting like a super dad. He spent a lot of time with the kids where he hadn't before. They were going on picnics, they were going fishing, and he wanted Tristan to miss school so he could work on the farm more. And she said, wanted him to stop band because it's for pussies, which he did stop band. And he didn't want to wear underwear because Todd didn't wear underwear. Like I said, I can't imagine the chafing with those farm jeans. and he wanted to talk like Todd and walk like Todd, but I think he walked like Todd because they were both not wearing underwear and they're probably chafed. Todd did Todd ask her again if she knew, about things that were going on, and she said that she would sidestep it because she didn't want to lie to Todd, and she also did not want to cover for Amy. She didn't want to be put in that position. So Todd looked at her with a really strange face at this time in the courtroom. And she would say, Todd, you need to talk to Amy. She wants to go out. She wants to look pretty. She wants to go on vacation. Why don't you spend time with her and the family? And then when this Terry was at a conference for work, she heard some rumors there. She says that somebody was talking and said that Amy was being naughty again, which meant that Amy was having another affair. She told Amy about this when she got back, and she had dinner with Amy. The person said that was spreading this said they heard it from her brother-in-law, who was good friends with Amy, and Terry's husband told her to tell Amy to tell Todd with her stepfather Randy and come clean about this before things got really bad. So when Amy was bringing eggs to Terry, she told Amy, look, someone let this cat out of the bag. You better take care of this. Amy was really upset, but Amy was more focused on who said it. Terry said that's not important, but told her, and she said, I'm going to tell Todd that there are rumors going around, the rumor mill. So Terry said, look, you better take Randy and you just better come clean with this whole thing. And she said no, she was fearful of Todd. She did not want to say that. So then she was asked if it was that because Amy was fearful of Todd. She did not say, but she was more fearful of Todd and Tristan's relationship. Terry got a text, and it was going to be that Amy was going to the state fair and that she was going to meet Jerry over there, and Terry encouraged Todd to go. And there was a conversation with Amy and Terry where Amy said, if I ever go up missing, look in our new timber. Okay, and that's this new land that they had bought a couple of years ago. Did you tell Todd to get divorced? She said, yes, I did, to prepare him. He said he had worked for this since he was 11 years old on the farm. He is not going to give it up now. And then she explains the procedure that Amy had was an ablation to help heavy bleeding. She had the same procedure 5 years prior, and she had no issues recovering. She even went right back to work. So that Amy had asked Terry to take her to surgery, but she couldn't because she was working, and it ended up that Todd took her. Okay. Terry asked her how her ablation went. She said it went really well, so much better, just a little bit of bleeding now. So then Terry explains a little bit about this procedure. Usually people are anemic, so what it does, it burns the lining of the uterus and people don't get periods anymore, and it helps the situation there. Did you delete some of your text messages? They asked Terry. She said yes, because like when she gets a new phone, she could accidentally delete things, or if she gets irritated with something, she will delete it. But she made the police aware of that, and she said they can try to, get them back through, she gave it the name of something they could look in, I don't know. Amy texted Terry and said she had a crappy week, which Terry said was probably about her grandmother, but they did go on to talk about what Amy was going to do. And Terry said, are you 100% sure that this Jerry is going to make changes for you? And she said, well, I'm 99% sure, yes, but if the 1% is what happens, then I'm strong enough to make this work on my own. So she wasn't worried about it. And she was very concerned, Amy, with getting Jerry fired, that if he would get fired because of this, or if Todd would make issues with him or whatever that would cause him to get fired. She did not want that to happen. And then Amy found out that Todd had called Jerry, and Todd felt Terry had said something to someone about things. And then there was searches of a premenopause or perimenopause. Todd was doing research because he said that Amy was not pulling her weight on the farm. Now in the cross-examination, they asked her about the friendship and their employment changes, and Terry and Amy remain good friends, so that was all reiterated. You both did volunteer work for Earlville Fire Department, yes, in the years 2008, 2009, and they talked about Amy working at Manchester Hospital, yes. You met Todd through Amy, is that correct? Yes. Todd is very passionate about his farm, yes. Now, during a 2013 golf outing, isn't that when Amy told you about the affair, the first affair? Yes. And your reaction was counseling to save the marriage? And she said, well, it wasn't exactly that. They told me, and then she kind of advised them a little bit about counselors. They took her advice. Okay? And you commented after this that Todd had a hard time getting over this, and he had more control of her time. But did you know if the counselor was telling them to do this, to be accountable for their time? And she said yes. She believed Amy and Todd said that. And Todd texted you about suspicions about Jerry and that Amy was acting funny? Yes. And Amy told you about Jerry as well, correct? Yes. Okay, and then they talked about texts that were there. And on July 26th, Amy says, can you talk? I'm in trouble. So that she offered to meet her, and they talked about it and what it meant, and that Amy was having another affair. On July 30th, her grandma passed away, and Amy sent that text about the longest, crappiest week, which she believed was due to her grandmother and the affair. Terry believed that. They asked her if they ever saw any type of inappropriate physical contact between Amy and Todd, and she said, well, no, but she heard about it once, that he pushed her down in the bed and had rough sex with her. Okay. At the conference, she heard rumors about Amy doing bad things. The conference was in Des Moines, and so she texted Amy and said, you need to give me a call. Amy decided to tell Todd about the rumors, thinking that that's all it would be. But Amy did say it was not what she needed. Amy was concerned and upset about the rumors of her having an affair, and now that it was known, Amy called a bunch of employees at Manchester Hospital asking for the rumors to be squelched. Yes, you heard that? Yes. Todd texted you and said, Amy did talk to me. Yes. And he said that she was upset, cried a lot, but most of all, today was good. And we even joked a little. Is that true? Yes. Okay, so then the defense says, well, the reaction to Amy telling him about the rumors is that most of all, today was good, and we even joked a little. Does that sound like, he's a hothead, or, if that's what they're trying to show, if he said that? Once again, they went to counseling. Yes, Todd said that was the only, once again, Terry recommended counseling. Todd said the only way to get her there is to drag her, okay? And that she was saying that he became super dad, and he said she gets mad so fast, she's totally different at home, just ask the kids. Well, Terry hears from Amy next. Amy says she's okay, she's at a water park with the kids, says that Todd and I talked, and we have to see what happens. I don't know, she said. Right? Text about what to do, to stick it out or not, were next, and you were very encouraging to make her own decisions and not depend on Jerry, correct? Yes. Then we have August 21st. There's a text there from Amy to Terry talking about some makeup sex with Jerry and kind of getting Terry in there to cover that she's having lunch to Todd. Terry didn't like this anymore. So if Todd texts, she said, I'd used you as a cover. That was on the 23rd, but I did not answer or enable her. Terry said, Todd texted and thanked Terry for having lunch with Amy and that he appreciated it, which made her feel weird. September and October of 2018, they were not together as much because Terry was resenting being put in that position. She didn't like to, mislead Todd on and be used as the cover. She didn't want to be anymore. Now then, that uncle stuff was going on as well, so she just said, yeah, it was a crazy time. It was also harvest time. Did Amy say anything to you about the harvest? No. Now, did you know anything about a relationship with Jerry? No, she was really concerned about her kids. And I believe there was a message about him being a super dad. You commented that he could continue to be. Yes, meaning that, well, maybe you could stay with him and he would continue this. After the revelation of the first affair, did you say Todd was controlling? Yes. Did that continue? Yes, it continued through 5 years up to the present. And then the defense said, but did you know she had an unlimited credit card with Cabela's? No. And then he asked her something like, did he ever limit what she could spend in Walmart? She said, I don't know. But you know that she went to Goodwill, and how do you know that? Well, I went with her with a couple of times. That's where she got a lot of the kids' clothes. Okay. Did you know how she arranged to have sex with Jerry, according to the discovery, over 100 times, if he was so controlling? And she said it was at another hog facility. At the time, someone even came in and saw them or something, as she was saying. But Jerry said they were meeting in hotels, the defense said. Terry says, I don't know. She was not being scrutinized, he said. And Todd works so hard. She said, I imagine he works hard. She said Jerry denied the relationship when Todd called. Jerry's wife said her marriage was solid. And you did hear, though, that Jerry's wife thought Todd was crazy and she blocked him from Facebook. And she said, I don't know that Todd even has a Facebook. Okay? Todd did not defend the mother with how he treated Amy. She said, I don't know. And then the defense goes through this summarization of this witness saying, would it be fair to say that you recommended counseling to them? And near the end of August, that rumors resurfaced again about another affair, and you talked, and she told you about the rumors, correct? And Todd's reaction was that nothing happened, right? That they even joked a little bit about it, right? And she started to say, Terry, that she distanced herself. She didn't want to be put in that place. It's not her place to tell Todd what's happening, but she doesn't want to lie. Did Amy tell you in August and September that Jerry continued to be the farm manager of this pig operation? Yes. And was she concerned that Jerry might be fired? Yes. To Terry's knowledge, did Todd ever call the place of Jerry's employment? And, she said no. There was a redirect about the rumors. Todd said it seemed like a good day, but Todd said the rumors were bad. And either way, it's either weird or true, and everyone is lying to me, is what he texted to Terry. Okay, the next witness is Dr. Kelly Cruz. She's a medical witness. She's a forensic pathologist. She generated the reports and did the autopsies. Okay, she had something in there that was saying that the woman was coming in who was impaled on a corn rake. She also had emergency medical devices that had been put into her. They did a blood toxicology because there was no urine to do that with. There was numbers of, they went into how the autopsy is, what the procedure is, and there's a number of injuries. So you take photos are shown, and they go through the photos talk about the injuries there. So what happened here was they started to talk about the abrasions, again, the contusions of the left side of the jaw. She again says that is blunt force injury, and the right hand had a number of abrasions and scrapes. The left had more bruising and scrapes. Those are defensive type wounds from a struggle. There were also abrasions and wounds on the left and right knees. Blunt force hits the skin. Sharp force injuries are longer, they penetrate. and there are injuries that you would receive from a knife or something like that, a sharp object that would divide the skin and cut it. The right side of Amy's back and chest had multiple sharp force wounds, injuries, approximately, they had 6 of them. And one was, they started under the arm on one side, and they even pierced her breast implant. So she went through the different wounds, and would say that there was she named them A, B, C, D, and just give you an idea that I think it was B that entered and hit the right lung in 2 different spots, and then the diaphragm punctured the liver. C entered the back and back into the chest, but not into the chest cavity. Then there was a puncture D, was the only injury of just the soft tissue, and it was the lowest level puncture wound. And puncture E did enter the left side of the chest cavity. It injured a vertebrae and entered the left side of the chest. Then there was another puncture wound F. It was the left side of the chest, but it did not injure organs, but it did enter the chest there. And like I said, there was a puncture under the arm, so she had to think about what the fatal wounds were. A lot of that she bled out. Of course, removing the corn rake, takes away the pressure, causes bleeding, so that was not a good thing to do. A, B, C, and F were more likely fatal. She said it went in 2 different directions. Okay, so you had A, B, C, D that could have all came from the same strike, but they started underneath the left arm, and they were kind of on top of each other. They went back to front, right to left, and backward. The other 2 punctures went back to front, right to left, but they went upward, which would show that she was impaled with that corn rake at least 2 times, but possibly 3 times. And the reason she says possibly 3 times is that puncture wound D may not have been together with A, B, and C, and it may have been its own strike. So definitely 2 times, possibly 3, she said. And the cause of death, she bled to death, nothing, to relieve the pressure from the wounds and everything. These wounds had entered her chest cavity. She filled up with blood. Her bloody clothing, they showed photos, and then there was a cross-examination. They talked about the bagging of the hands, and she said so that would preserve, evidence. But, what happened? Were her fingernails tested? No, they did the clippings, and they put the clippings and the nail clipper in a bag, but they never did anything with it. Okay, and that was the end of her testimony. Now, the cleaner at the hospital, Deborah Schubring, she received a phone call from Amy, and Amy was crying and hysterical. And Deborah didn't even know who it was. She thought it might have been one of her kids. She didn't even know. She asked who it was, said it was Amy. At many times she couldn't even understand her, but what she was asking if she had heard any rumors at the hospital. This woman said, no, I did not. She said, Todd will kill me if he finds out. And she said, you don't know what it feels like to hear Tristan say, if Dad finds out, he'll kill you, about this affair. And while Amy is speaking, she's hysterical. Did you recognize her voice finally? Yes. Okay, but she hadn't even spoken to this woman like 5 years. Why would you call her? The cross went over where she worked. She left about 5 years ago. I don't know, is what this woman said. Do you know why she was concerned about rumors? No. And then there was another friend, her last name was Burr. She didn't really have much to say, just that Tristan had been very upset on the bus one morning, and she found out from Amy it was because of this, these rumors and stuff about this affair, and that was, about what the crux of it. Did she tell you about this? Did she tell you about Jerry? Oh no, that was about the crux of it. And then Jerry took the stand, okay? So Jerry came on the stand, and he said that they had only oral relations, okay? And they read some emails the day of November 10th, and they were very cold on Jerry, saying he never said I love you or anything in them. She did. And he says that the 100 times that they were together was, really overstated. It sounds like his wife left him by the questioning, but I'm not sure. Said Todd was not angry when he called him. It says he thinks Todd believed him. He thinks, okay, so when Jerry took the stand, and then he just said that, he thought that Todd believed him. And did Todd call your wife? Yes, he called my wife. How did you know? He said, well, she told me right away that she did. And that he continued to have this relationship with Amy right up until the time of her death. And there were 3 emails that they went through, and it sounded like Jerry was sick, but he was going to be staying around in that area. And again, he didn't return any I love yous. And one of the last emails was about 10:40 or so in the morning, and Amy had said, you know what I'm doing today? I'm cleaning light fixtures out in the hog barn. WTF. Okay, then there was another friend who lived next door to Amy, Amy's mom and stepdad, and they talked about tattoos, and they talked about her marriage and her affair with Jerry, and they talked about the rumors, and she wasn't aware of any of the rumors. And then so they say on the 31st everything's hunky-dory, then the uncle got sick after the grandmother, right? So she got upset about Todd's mother, what she said. But did she tell you that Todd defended her? And she said, no, she didn't know about that. On November 1st, you were sharing medical issues with her. November 6th, she had the procedure. And she said on another note that Amy had texted and said, this is my new Jeep. The defense said, do you know who bought her that Jeep? She said, well, I thought couples would buy them together. I didn't even think about it. And she tell you that Todd gave her $1,500. She said he did, to spend however she pleased. And this woman told Amy to save it for her divorce. Okay? And then we have Carrie Callan, who's the tax and regulatory, who does tax and regulatory analysis, and she's also a graphic designer at the t-shirt shop. These just went on. It really kind of the same thing over and over. But day 3, we had Travis Hemsath. They say his name. One says Hemstat, the other one says Hemsath. Delaware County Sheriff's Office. He's a deputy sheriff. He investigates major crimes, or when he's not doing that, he's on patrol duty. He got this case on 11/10. He began to work in the evening. When he came into work at 5 p.m., he learned about this incident at the Mullis farm by Luke Thompson, who was the deputy that was first on the scene there. So he was escorted by Luke to the farm. They arrived at about 6 p.m. It was dark. The family was in the house, okay? And he went to the red shed. Luke showed him where Amy was located, and he took over processing the crime scene. He measured the doorway around the walk space. It was 30 inches. He took some pictures. He only saw a couple of drops of blood and thought that it was just when she was exiting that they were there. And let's see here. The rake was in the corner by the dog crate. He was looking for indicators to show a fall happened. He could find nothing. The pet carrier was located in the rear of the shed straight ahead. There was a light dusting of snow, so he ran around the shed, looking for any type of footprints, and he couldn't find them. He looked outside in the gravel for blood. He looked in the hog barn to see if there were cameras, and this is very strange. You should have had a flashlight. On the north hog barn, he saw some, but then he said in the south hog barn, he couldn't get a good look. Did you have a flashlight? Come on. The medical examiner's office, the autopsy, he went there for the autopsy. He brought the clothing and the corn rake there. And then the deputy was cross-examined by the defense. You were told where the body was by Tristan? Yes. You took a walk around and you looked for places to see if there was someone else? Yes. You only found 2 drops of blood where Amy was said to be located? Yes. Now the cameras on the south barn, one of those cameras pointed right at the red shed and the other at the grain bins and the yard and the shop, but the feed was cut, okay? So there's an email, the feed was cut during the trial there. So when we came back, they were talking about the email account associated with the iPad. And they talked about the Cellbrite exam that was done and also the manual exam. And when he had the manual exam, there was a search for, let's see, before that, if all the searches are not on Cellbrite, what would that tell us? And he said, well, we got the searches on Google as well, from Google. Sometimes when you get Cellbrite, it includes deleted material, correct? Yes. And then this attorney started to ask about, could people sign into the device from different accounts? You know, creating doubt that Todd conducted all the searches that we're to learn about. There were over, 700 pages or something. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, John Torbett was working with this investigator. He's a criminal investigator from the state of Iowa, a Department of Criminal Investigations. And this deputy is working with him. This deputy conducted about 34 interviews of the, witnesses, what have you. And he executed search warrants for these electronics, excuse me, for the residents and all the devices. The camera system was collected on November 16th, and they go over some overviews of the farm. Todd looks exasperated. They show photos of the house, the grain bins, the red shed. There's what looks like, I said, like doors of the shed look like they could just be kicked out. They're very, very flimsy looking. The search warrants, again, were to search the home, take photos, and Special Agent John Turbett was working that again. Remember that? Okay, so who was in the house with Todd when you went back there? Todd, the attorney, Todd's sister. They got the electronics. There was Kindles, there was smartphones, and then there was Todd's iPad. And Todd had a combine they want to talk about. He had the cameras in the office. So you took note of the camera angles. Then one was pointed right at the red shed, correct? But the iPad, Todd said, was in the tractor. He had his brother Mike bring it to the house, and he handed it to Todd and then to the investigator. Now Todd tells a different story, that it was handed directly to the investigator when he takes the stand. Passcode for the iPad, asked Todd, who was very hesitant to give it to him until he looked at his attorney, and then he gave it to him. Now there's one DVR system for both sets of cameras there that are on these hog barns. So they found that the cameras were not working. So they don't know if it was not recording or if things were deleted. There was no recording from October 29th through to November 11th, the day after the murders, but they couldn't tell if they were deleted or just not recorded. Now, there was a search warrant sent for Amy's emails. The last one was around 10 or so in the morning, so it put the murders for them at 10:14 a.m. to 12:01 when the 911 call came in. And Todd was arrested 3.5 months after this incident. Were there any other suspects? Well, Jerry Frazier, but he was ruled out, this investigator says, and he was ruled out because his cell phone was pinging on towers in Omarosa, which was 45 minutes from the Mullis's farm, and the wife was working some charity event, so she was ruled out, not a suspect. And then they have Todd's email. They looked at the contents of the iPad with the physical exam, and they can see right away that on November 6th there was a safe search of organs of the body that they saw. And with the search warrant, they got their information from Google, came with a certificate of authenticity, 700 pages, of which they're looking at 11 right now. And there was things like killing were accepted centuries ago. These are searches, searched for characteristics of cheating women. Visited sites like Truth About Deception and Stats About Infidelity. Visited Psychology Today, Love and Sex in the Digital Age, Women Who Cheat, 6 traits that almost every cheating woman has. Under Love, Sex, Signs, Cheating, 16 facts about cheating women. These are sites that he visited and articles that he read. Searched on 1/15/2018, what did ancient cultures do to infidelity? Then, did ancient cultures kill adulterers? Went to a site called Adultery. Okay, on 1/8, there were searches of Thrill of the Kill, Thrill of the Hunt, famous quote, no thrill like. There were various searches. It goes on and on. Things like Thrill of the Kill, Thrill of the Hunt, did ancient cultures kill adulterers? Once you hunt man, you will always feel the thirst. If you want to go back, you can go into the lives and hear everything there, but this is going to be a good synopsis to get you what you really need to hear. January 21st, how to make sure your kids are yours, test to show if you're the biological father. Then there were visits to DNAtesting.com. Again in January, how to test DNA at home, how to do DNA testing without the father knowing, visited DNA test without consent possible, and then Oneida Bows, the Phoenix, about a hunting bow, the longest distance of this hunting bow and arrow, what happens to cheaters in history, the making of a cheater site, once a cheater, always a cheater, which was an article on the Huffington Post site, what happened to cheating spouses in historic Aztec tribes. Then there were sites, world history, American Aztec history, aztechhistory.com, searching for killing unfaithful women. The New York Times had an article, punishment is 18 months for killing cheating spouse. Baltimore and Sun News was about some PNAG murder trial opener. Let's see, Crimes of Passion site was visited. Human Overpopulation Solutions. It was a search, July of 2018. Are some people less buoyant than others? Other ones about scientific sites that looked at muscles versus fat. Also, Odd Body Swimming, Relax and Swim, Physics and Buoyancy, swimteach.com, why does my body sink? Checking content of text messages on the phone, get text messages from iOS. Then there were forums where it was searched, visited, can my husband read my deleted text messages online? Kids text messages, eager to check those texts. Securetracks.com, searched for Jerry Frazier around Anamosa. Then address searched of Jerry Frazier's. Then Christy Frazier, Jerry's wife, was searched. Her Facebook page. Her Twitter account was visited. He found where she worked through Manta. It was Rogers Concrete. That was visited. Searched farmland prices in Iowa. Example of elbow carry of a firearm. Degree of zone of fire span out in front of hunters. How long can you survive without water, without food? How many days can you survive without water? How long can you not survive without water? What to do if you're lost in extreme cold and no fire, the best way to survive. Then there was a bunch of heat stroke symptoms searches, proper way to treat heat stroke, heat exhaustion and heat stroke, the best way to stop severe bleeding. There were searches for correct treatment for 2nd and 3rd degree burns, what to do with large open chest wounds. And then there was a site visited with patient care, treating sucking chest wounds, skin cold, clammy, pale with a low pulse, rapid breathing. Then the organs of the body was searched on November 6th. Organ anatomy site visited. Body organs, maps and diagrams. DNA on the Rake. No, we don't think so. We didn't test it because he used that stuff and it's inconsistent to touch DNA. They went through that. The only suspect is Todd. Why would they test the fingernails? It wasn't like they had some mystery attacker. And it's all being done from Todd, you say, the defense says these searches, then how come there were searches for wedding dresses and wedding rings and things like Pinterest? You know, why? Explain this. And so they brought that into it, okay? And that, you know, other people were using it, and, you know, why would he do that? Well, I don't know. Maybe he likes to shop. Maybe he was buying that. I can't say. Well, he said, couldn't it be someone else? He said, it's possible, it's not probable. Then John Turbot took the stand. He's a special agent with the Iowa State Division of Criminal Investigations, the DCI. He usually does homicides, child abductions, things of that nature. Became involved because his immediate supervisor briefed him on this, and he responded. He was told that it was reported by the defendant that this was a fall, but the autopsy showed different. And then he was called by Travis Halstaff that he should interview Jerry, and he did interview Jerry. He's a plainclothes cop. A lot of times he was in an unmarked car. He had Jerry there. He had an interview with Jerry for about 1.5 hours, where he found out that Jerry did admit that they had a romantic and sexual involvement together up until the day of the murder. The Gmail account gave his whereabouts, college-age son and wife. College-age son was excellent recall, and so he had said that he didn't always come home, but he remembers distinctly that weekend he came home to complete a project that his father wanted him to, so he was together with his father. And Jerry's wife was not a suspect because she was working all day on a community charity project. And even at one time she had to call her husband and son, and they came to bring her something she needed. And their cell phones pinged and put them around Anamosa and during the times of the murder. So Christy was never a suspect, and, you know, it was just, they were all ruled out. Defendant interviews were conducted on 1/16, and at first the sheriff John LeClaire was there for intros, but then about 2.5 hours, you know, of talking, nothing was happening. It was video and audio, you know, recordings made of this. Now he went over the background, growing up, his parents, his 2 brothers, how he met Amy, his work, etc. They talked in great detail about the marriage. And Todd was saying what a great marriage he had. They had open communication, they had all this great stuff, but he talked about the whole deal, about the puzzle in the morning and out to there and what happened, right? And he kept saying how great the relationship was, but then he said, are there any affairs? And finally, Todd said, well, 5 years earlier, yes, there was an affair, and he had to confront Amy about it, but did you ever have to do this again? Todd would not say anything about this, even when this investigator brought Jerry up. So after he went to get him a drink of water and got himself a drink of water, he came back, and Todd said, actually, I did have some concerns about Jerry. And they showed this clip of the interview to the jury, and then they talked about Jerry and Amy. He said, they seemed a bit friendlier than I wanted them to be, but they denied anything was happening. Oh, after he said no and Jerry said nothing was going on, Todd was okay. He just said, don't contact her, keep it within the barns and don't do it so often. And he put it to rest. He didn't have any further conversations. He let it go, is what he told the investigator. So he tells him, look, the evidence is clear that you killed Amy, okay? Would you just stop? So he goes on and on trying to get Todd to admit this, but Todd just will not. It's not that he denies it. He just says things like, what kind of evidence? And, you know, so was what this investigator found was weird. And they had a break for lunch, came back, and again, the agent said, yes, we indicated to Todd that this was a homicide. Again, they published another clip of that interview. We completed our investigations. You were responsible for Amy's death. And Todd would say, how am I responsible? He goes on about how the autopsy shows that Todd did this, but they go round and round and round. Todd never admitting that he did this. And he tells about Amy's affair and how they would split the farm. And no way, man, are you going to let that happen? I know you loved Amy. I know you loved her with all your heart, but that's why these things happen. You hurt the ones you love. I know you're sorry. Now, Todd is smirking at the video as we see him in the courtroom. but you told me you're a good dad, right? But the defendant indicates he will not indicate anyone else or any other explanation, but he just will not say what he did. If he did, he will not confess to this. On February 28th, 2019, he was arrested, and again, this John is there, and he says, look, this is your more opportunity to tell the truth after the initial arrest. Evidence shows that this is why we are here. Todd said nothing. He said, are you aware of the finger? Then this is now the cross. Are you aware of the fingernail? No, excuse me. I'm sorry, it is not. It is still the prosecution. Are you aware of the fingernail clippings? Yes, that's standard protocol. Did you have them analyzed? No, why not? Because we do that in whodunit cases. There was no whodunit here. It's clear who did this. There's no mystery attacker. Did you view the medical examiner's report? Yes. And did she say anything about the nails? No, they were short and intact. Nothing of real value to test there. Cross-examination asked about the November 16th interview, and they asked him how long he had been doing this, 19 years, and how many interrogations, dozens and dozens. You have training, you use a certain methodology, right? Yes. Did you do the Reed method? No. But he was familiar with it, and you say Mr. Mullis did not deny anything, but when he says, you guys want me to confess to something I didn't do, isn't that a denial? He says, no, I would not call that a denial. You don't give him a chance to answer anything? He said, no, we gave him a chance. So you told him this phony thing that you have information from cloud conversations that what happened in the Mullis home, right? So she's like trying to say you were deceptive, and this detective is saying, no, it wasn't deceptive. Amy could have done that. We can do that. Todd never admitted he was aware of any ongoing relationship with Jerry and Amy, correct? Jerry told you that Todd called him and his wife, and they denied it and said that it satisfied Todd, right? He even called them up to apologize. Yes. Todd said on that was all that Todd admits to is an affair from 5 years ago. And then they talk about the fingernail clippings. How can you say there's only one suspect? I don't understand. Shouldn't you at least do that? Well, we would have evidence, to do that. We would analyze only when we had evidence that there's someone else. We know Tristan said Todd was in the barn the whole time. And he said, I am aware. Wouldn't that mean there could be someone else? And he said, if Tristan is telling the truth. So then the defense said, so you only investigate when people are telling the truth? And didn't she have defensive wounds? Didn't she have a horrible beating? Couldn't the fingernails have led you to more investigation, to something else? And he said, you told Todd you took photos and of his whole body. Was there any indication of injuries? He said, I did not see any. And the redirect talked about the weather that day, but he didn't recall. And that's just to show Todd had so many layers on. Any injuries at Amy's fingernails? No, there were not. Do you know the Reed method? Yes, he does. Did you go through Reed training? Yes. Okay. Did you used other methods of, he said he used other methods of interrogating that evolved out of more research. And then there was a redirect from the defense, and you said there was no injury to the hands. But he said, I was talking about the fingernail area. Okay, and then we went, there was a motion made, okay, outside of the presence of the jury for judgment for the acquittal and the dismissal of charges, because they said the prosecution did not prove their murder in first degree, that Todd committed an action on Amy, and that Amy died from such action, and that he committed it with malice and intent. The state has not shown that. There's no evidence Todd did this. Okay, he never attacked her. Their witness Tristan showed that he was with Todd the entire time except for 2 drinks of water. Goes on and on, but that's it. It's just emotion. It's kind of like just nothing to do with nothing because it's denied. The acquittal is denied. And then we have Mike Mullis, the brother of Todd. He looks sick to his stomach. He's 54 years old. He's self-employed as a farmer. And so you guys, you connect with each other, you share your machinery, you work together, you work on one another's land. Yes. Were you aware that Todd had an iPad? Yes, we use it. We use it as a field monitor. We use it for GPS. We use it for searches. You use it. You searched excavator tracks. You know the password. Yes. And so did you know there were security cams? You had the same ones. And he says, well, they weren't working. They don't always work because the cats get in the window. They throw the antennas down. That's what happens. Cats knock the antennas down. So it never, was recording. And that happens. Cats like to get in the window. Cross-examination says, you remember using the iPad in the spring of 2018. Cameras, you can turn them off if you choose to, or if you unplug them. So did you go every day in October or November to see if those cameras were on or off? And they didn't, so there was nothing further. Then we have Michael James Krogman. They never asked him his age. Were you in Earlsville area? Were you aware of a situation regarding Amy Mullis? Yes, they came upon the patrol car. They went to see what was going on. And he stopped, he hugged Tristan, he turned him around because he didn't think Tristan should be staring at his mother while they were working on her. And Tristan seemed to be in shock. So he took Tristan back to the house. And again, Todd went with this guy's dad who was in his car. This guy took the truck, took Tristan back to the house, and he saw that the deputies came behind them, and he told Tristan, just tell the truth. Tristan took them over to where Amy was. Any discussion was very little that he had with any of these deputies. He told them just tell the truth. He said that Tristan was crying a little, maybe, but not sobbing. And then this gentleman went into the house. Tristan came in soon after. He went out again, this gentleman, and he came in when they came in to question Tristan a little bit. There was no cross-examination. Then we have Todd Mullis take the stand, okay? So they go on to where he lives and his age 43, his family, his father Leroy, his mother Elaine. They're both alive, 2 brothers, Mike and Pat, 2 sisters, Lori and Lynn, 3 children he has. Occupation is farming. He farms crops. He has a hog farm. He has custom feeding operation, and he sold farm chemicals as well to earn more money. Always help each other on the farm. His brother Pat, and his dad. He met Amy. He met her at the Delaware County Fair in Manchester. He met her in a beer tent or something like that. And they dated for 16 months before they got married. She lived close by, and she was working as a bookkeeper in St. Luke's. They got married. She moved into the family farm. He said she grew up on a farm, but she did not spend a lot of time talking so much about when she grew up. They married in 2004. Did you have the hog buildings then? No, we had dairy cattle at Mike's farm. The hogs on other farms they had, and Amy loved this farming. She had a lot of interest, same as him, sports, hunting, fishing, tubing in the creek, he said, canoeing, four-wheeling. She loved the same things that he did. They went deer, squirrel, turkey, coyote, bow and shotgun hunting. And Amy was in St. Luke's. She was like a lower level nurse, he said, and then she became an LPN and then an RN, and she was training when he met her. And then 4 to 5 years ago, there was that affair. She was working at the Manchester hospital, yes, and Terry Stainer was good friends, right? Yes. And after you learned about it, he said that Amy decided to quit the affair, go to counseling, and wholeheartedly work it out. They decided that together, that they will work this out. Terry wanted Amy to go to counseling for depression, and then she encouraged them to do that. Okay, so then you guys had meals every night? Yes, just about every night. Amy wanted to quit her job, he said 5 years ago, to be a stay-at-home mom. It's what she wanted. She liked it. She liked it a lot, okay? They built the first hog barn to make more income since Amy was leaving her, job as a nurse. And then he sold chemicals to make even more money. He built a system for that. Amy built a system for that. She helped out on the farm. And in 2016, they bought a farm with their dad and brother, which had a nice timber part of it. They had acres of grass, and they had this timber part. And so there was recreation ground and work ground, but the timber side had an old pond that they redid together. And they planted trees, and their dream was to build a log cabin there one time. So they had partial ownership of another site as well in February of 2018. They also got a transfer of ownership where he lives that was in his parents' name, and they transferred that over to the name of Amy and Todd. In the spring of 2013, they were gutting and redoing a house. Things were going well. Then they had this affair, they had counseling, and then, she was so happy to be a stay-at-home wife. She loved it. The summer of 2018, did you have any concerns about your marriage? He says no. They said Amy was getting out. He said, oh yeah, she had lots of outside interests. She had pork producers, volunteer EMS, golf. She went on a houseboat trip. Yes, she went on a trip to Alaska with her parents, her stepdad and her mom, and Tristan in Florida. She went down with Taylor because Taylor had nationals. You didn't go with her on any of this? No. Amy's mom, she would go to regular visits. He said she often went alone once the kids got older, or she would be with Taylor when she could coordinate it with tumbling trips. Okay, so you were comfortable with her going on these trips? And he said, yes, I encouraged it. He said in 2018, you contacted Jerry, right? So you made the call, correct? What prompted that? He said he saw Amy acting differently, and there were a large number of texts on his phone bill. Amy and Jerry did have a legitimate reason to communicate with one another. Yes. Okay. You contacted Jerry, and he said really it was just about showing pigs, kids, gymnastics, his daughter, nothing with anything. He assured you, he guaranteed you nothing was happening. Yes. Okay. And so you're just a tad bit unsure, so you call Eileen, and she says, text Terry. You called Eileen, then you texted Terry. Eileen said she would call the wife, right? And then you called Randy, and he said, I don't know what to tell you, but you did call the wife. And she said it sounded curious and she would look into it. But then you said you were able to put it to rest. And after talking to them, you sounded convinced that there was nothing going on. And so he called to apologize, right? You called to apologize, correct? And that you were sorry that you interfered with their life, correct? You talked to Jerry about other things, yes. And how was your relationship after that? It was fine. So then they asked Todd about, what about these rumors? How did Amy approach you with that? And she said, well, Amy told him, hey, Terry let me know that some rumors are flying around. And I don't know who started them, but I just want you to know. And he said, for crying out loud. And then he thought about it for a couple of days. Amy's grandmother died and fell. She broke her hip. She got sick. She died in Eldora. And then he did attend the wake and the funeral. And that's where he met her friend Patricia. Okay, and he met her there. Amy was gone a lot due to her grandmother, right? And then were the kids with her when she did these visits? No. Was there another health issue? Yes, they were at a football game. They got a call from Amy's mom a call from Randy that the uncle had a brain bleed. Uncle Jerry is his name, and it was quite a lengthy illness. They didn't even think he was going to make it. A long hospitalization and recovery. It was in Des Moines. She was gone close to 30 days and 2 months, and she mostly did not take the kids. Was her absence a concern? He said not at first, but then it was dragging on. he had his kids, he had a huge load, and she didn't have her share of it, and he had a lot going on. He had the harvest, and his kids were in sports that he had to shuffle them around to, and so, you know, things were getting hairy, and so he had to mention things, but he didn't press the issue. And he said, you know, couldn't somebody else help out? This guy's got kids and stuff. They mentioned text between him, Todd, and Terry about this issue, and he said yes, he was swamped, and he wanted to know what they would suggest, what Terry could suggest to him. Okay, are you aware Amy had a run-in with your mother about this? And he said yes, she was picking up Wyatt, and my mother said things. Amy called and said, your mom blew up at me and said I'm a bad mom. So then she said, the prosecutor said, did you ever send a text to Tristan and say Amy is crazy? He said, no. I sent a text to Eileen about the fight with my mom, that she had words with my mom. Did you stick up for her? Yes. He said, he told his mother, there's no reason for what you did. You have to be understanding as to what Amy's going through. And up until that conversation with Jerry, you had no reason to think there was an affair. You thought she was just overwhelmed and concerned with her family. And he said yes. And then when she was bleeding abnormally, you did research about menopause. He said yes, I did bleeding and mood swings. Okay, and the iPad, use it on the farm? Yes. Anyone else use it? Amy, to download chemical bills, research price quotes. Mike and the nephew used it, he thought, and they all know the password. Possible to change Google accounts. You know, could someone sign into their mail? He said yes. Okay, and do you think Amy would look at clothing? If they said, do you think you would look at clothing like, oh no, they said, do you think Amy would go in and look at clothing? And he said, I don't know, I guess. You looked at the state's exhibit for the Google printout, right? Yes. Do you have any idea who looked up cheating wives? No. Okay. And topics, he said he and Amy would look up topics that correlated to movies they just saw. They watched a lot of History Channel, so they would follow up with certain searches, some of the ones that were done. Okay, and what about keeping your son from becoming a pussy? He said, no, I did not do that. Do you know who would? I don't know, except that we had an issue with Wyatt. Some kid was taking money from him, so we were talking about that. Amy could have looked that up. Did you tell Tristan to quit band because it was for pussies? He said, no, he quit on his own. Does he do any other activities? Yes, football, he loves that. Okay, then on close examination, there were searches for Pornhub. Are you familiar with that? Todd says yes. What is it? It's an adult video site. Okay, and who used that? Both Amy and I together. Why would you use that? He said, I'm not 25, okay? And if she wants to make an hour or so of it, I needed some outside help. It's kind of embarrassing. Yes. Then they go for the search on 11.6 of the body organs, maps, and diagrams. What was up with that? He said Taylor had a lot of questions about Amy's surgery, so he was trying to show her different things, and they did that together. Okay, so then what about the searches for swimming, the buoyancy? He said that's because they were in the pond, and so who was a better floater? He said he sinks like a rock, so they were discussing that, and he was going to sites with the kids and showing them that, okay? Then they made him look at certain things in there, all about the heat stroke and the chest wounds and the burns, and what's that? Oh, that's all regarding a hunter education course online that Taylor was taking. I thought, did anybody check this curriculum? Neither side checked the curriculum to see if that's true, or didn't report it. I don't know why, but they didn't. And he said that's what all that was about, and they were helping Taylor with her stuff. And then they said, well, did you look up wedding dresses? Did you ever search for that? No. Did you search for this Ohana tattoo? No. Had you ever heard of an Ohana tattoo? He said, not until the other day when PK, I call her PK, but Patricia and Amy, until they said that. Okay. Pinterest, did you search for that? No. Do you have any idea what Pinterest is? No. What about this DNA testing without consent? Possible DNA tests without father knowing? Did you do those? No. Did Amy discuss any concern, about this? No. Okay, are you concerned that your children are not yours? No. Okay, what about Kay's jewelry? No. Zales? No. Okay, hotels in Newton? He said, I never search for hotels. Okay, so based on Google summary, do you agree that this shows that only your searches? He says, no, I disagree. Okay, so they said, Tristan took the stand, right? And he said that you guys got up. Yeah, we did. We hung out for about 10-15 minutes. We got dressed. We took the truck. We went to the site, but we stopped to talk to his brother Mike, his nephew. We heard the ground was frozen. They couldn't do what they wanted, so they came back. They had a little breakfast. They talked to Amy. And then what happened? Then we're going to go get the barns ready for the new pigs coming in, right? And then Amy started to talk a little bit about her mother and stepfather having Thanksgiving, and they talked and they discussed the hogs that were coming in and all kinds of things like that, he said. So was there any reaction from Amy? And he said, well, she asked if we needed help. Okay, well, she had a medical procedure on 11/6. He said, yes, that's correct. And you did take her and it was outpatient? Yes, it was. And she was feeling a little cooped up in the house on November 10th because she had been in the house for the last few days. And so she said, if you need help, can I help? And Amy was getting dressed, so they went out first. And then he went out with Tristan first, right? Amy came out later, and he was accurate that Tristan's, what he said there, he said, well, there was a few things different, but yeah, it was mostly accurate. Tristan was doing the heaters, Amy was doing the lights, he was doing the nipple feeders, and he would notice Amy getting down, bracing herself against the fence. She was a little dizzy, and Tristan asked, are you okay, Mom? She said, I'm dizzy, a little lightheaded, but she was fine. They had further concerns because she was getting dizzy so often. So they kept asking. She said it ain't that bad. She wanted to help, but he said, I guess she didn't want to feel worthless. That was something. At some point she agreed to leave the hog barn, and he said both Tristan and he were concerned that she was going to get hurt. So anyway, they have her go get this pet carrier, and because she didn't want to go at first, so they thought this would be a good way for her to help. And so she went to do that. Then they were changing their boots in the hog barn. They didn't see the carrier, so Tristan said, I'll go check it out. Oh, he said, was Tristan there the whole time with you? Yes. He went out or maybe 2 times to get a drink. Was that long? No, it was a matter of seconds. Did you ever leave? No. How long were you guys working until, you stopped? About an hour and 15 minutes. They said, let's go grab some lunch. We were cleaning up. We were changing our boots. We were standing in the window. We didn't see the pet carrier. Had a conversation with Tris, and he said, want me to go check? And I said, yeah, okay, Todd says. And so he was going to go grab it as well. And Todd was just finishing washing up, changing his boots. And he went outside. He heard Tristan yell. The second time he went running over. He was yelling on the one side of the door and looking at his mom. He was like speechless. He stepped in to look at Tristan, and Amy was hunched over, leaning up against the door. He dove down by her. He put his head near her, yelling at her, trying to get her attention. No response. He needed to get her help. He needed to get her to the hospital. Something was wrong. He tried to lift her up under her arms, but the handle was hitting the totes. So he grabbed the corn rake and he pulled it out of her, and he threw it off in the corner. And then Tris took off, got the truck. He had to carry Amy out. She was like a noodle. She was very hard to maneuver. He carried her. He got the door open. He got Tris inside, and he put her on his lap to hold her. And then he got in to drive. They closed the door, took off, and then he started calling 911. Okay, and then the deputies came, and they took over. So they described you as excited. He said I was in reaction mode. I had an adrenaline rush. So you took over with the deputies took over, and then they took Tristan at your request. Michael, that guy Michael, took him back to the farm, yes. So he said that everything was happening at once, and they were trying to turn Tristan away. The EMTs told Todd to go comfort your son, and Todd thought about the kids were home alone, so he called his mom, and then he was told that Amy died. He had to talk to the police. He got he started to get things going as far as looking up songs for Amy's wake, her funeral. He tried to keep the kids back in school, keep them in a routine. Okay, and they say you didn't deny it, when you were being questioned. Did you deny it? Yes. Did this investigator ever give you a chance to say anything? He said, I couldn't even say 2 words. And the deputy said he checked the cameras. Yes. Did you know they were not working? No. Did the cats do that? Did they sit in the window? He said yes. And one camera, wasn't working from 10:29 to 11. And he said, well, there's no activity, but did you check? No. One camera, nothing at all. And then on 11:11, activity on one. How did that happen? He said, well, the family members asked, did you get anything on the camera? So he went there and he looked, and he saw that the antennas had been knocked off, so there was no signal, so there was no use looking. I knew that didn't get anything. I thought to myself, how long does he know that it's been off? What if it just came off that morning? At least check, right? That's why I don't believe that. Wouldn't he have checked, what could have happened, find out when it happened or anything? So then he said, you made a comment, let me talk to Tristan, but when a bunch of people came through, before you knew it, he was already talking to Luke Thompson, right? You were not present? No. Todd, did you ambush your wife? Did you brutally beat her and chop her up with a fork? And he said, no, I did not. Cross-examination, they start talking about, they go over his purchase of the farm and the reaction of his brothers and the relation of where his brothers' farms are there. You're all within 3 miles. Okay, you all farm together, yes. Okay, and then you purchased additional land, correct? And did you have the hog barns when you were first married? No. He explains how that happened. Only people worked on the farm were you, Amy, the kids, your brothers, your father, no hired hands, no. Okay, and you love the farm. You want to leave it as a legacy to your children if they want a farm. But you were excited Tristan wants to be a farmer, didn't you? He said yes, if he wants to be. And then when Amy and you married, you were part of some family trust. And he says yes, and then you have a gleaner combine, correct? Tractors, yes, and you guys go hunting and fishing, correct? Okay, but back when this happened, you had only a flip phone, correct? Yes, so you were not able to do internet searches on your phone, correct? Correct. And Amy had a smartphone, right? Yes. Kids had trap phones and stuff, yes. Okay, the first affair, she was working in the hospital, and you say it was Amy's decision to stop working and be a stay-at-home mom? He said yes, and when Wyatt was 3, she stopped. And then he said, but Amy still went golfing and shopping, etc. And he encouraged her if it made her happy. And then, let's see, you knew she met a person at the hospital? Yes. So it wasn't this picture-perfect open relationship you portrayed it as? Yes. Never talked about how did she meet this guy? Did you talk about that through the hospital? Okay. On 11/10, the day of Amy's murder, you did chores off-site. You came back. Amy was doing a puzzle. She had plans to go shopping with Taylor to look for snow boots, correct? Yes. You and Tristan went out first, then Amy came out. Amy got dizzy. You and Tristan were concerned. You didn't want anything to happen to her, right? And then you asked her if she wanted to stay, and you see again that she's getting dizzy. And so you say she could go into the house, but then you ask her to go get a pet carrier, and then she talks about the weight of this pet carrier and how, she shouldn't have been carrying weight, and you took her to that, hospital appointment, and you signed her release, and she was not supposed to be carrying anything above, 10 pounds, right? So, she was found on her hands and knees with a corn rake sticking out of her back, right? Okay, and there were other things in the path, like there was an auger there, and exactly, she was talking about where everything is located, the chemical totes. The left, there's junk and jugs, okay? After you turn, the pet carrier's straight ahead on the left, he said. So there's items on both sides, not a huge passageway. And he says, depends where you are, maybe 5 or 6 feet. And she said, and this where the pet carrier is, you see the pet carrier, okay? You know that the weight, again, you sign the discharge papers, nothing over 10 pounds, but you thought, oh, okay, go over there and get it, that'd be good after you're dizzy. And he said, so she was like being sarcastic about that. And then she said, later you and Tristan are in the hog barn, and it's about 1 hour since you've seen Amy, who says the pet carrier's not there. He says, me, I think. You said Tristan said, I will check. And he does not want to go to the house, she said, after 1 hour. You think she would still be in the shed? Why wouldn't he go into the house? But he tries to explain that, okay, well, Tristan would be just going to get the pet carrier, and then he would go into the house. And then you hear the yelling the second time, and you see your wife on the ground when you run over there, and her position, what is it like? He said it's like a hunched fetal position. Her hands are down. He said, I'm not sure if I remember where her hands are, but she had a corn rake in her, right? Yes. And you don't call 911, no. You try to pick her up with the rake sticking out of her? And he says, yes, right? Okay. And see those rags on the shed floor she shows him? Where the doors come together, is that where her body was? And Tristan's about to pass out when you were carrying her? Yeah, but that was later, he said. First I pulled her away from the door, and then I had my hand on her face, and I pulled her over, and then the handle kept coming into contact with the chemical totes, so I had to manipulate it and take it out of her. And she said, oh, you really had to, no, so we're coming in contact with the chemical totes. And she said, you had to manipulate it, right? You had to take it out of her. He said, it came right out. You pulled straight out. And then I just threw it and grabbed her under her arms and got her out of there. And then I carried her 30 to 40 feet like this to the truck, okay? And she said, you don't call 911. You don't have Tristan call 911. You tell Tristan to get the truck, and you tell him to get it, and you're getting her out. You lift her right up. She says, don't you know that you shouldn't take something out when it cause bleeding? You're not supposed to do that. Don't you know that? You never heard of such a thing? And he said, no, or if he did, he didn't recall it that day, right? So you get in the driver's seat and you start driving after you put your wife in on Tristan, who's in the passenger seat, and it's 15 minutes to the Manchester hospital, and you finally pull out and you call 911, right? And that corn rake, that's yours, isn't it? Okay, and then she goes through, like, it was on the farm, right, when you bought it? And he said, no, I bought it from the farm across the street in 2012. Okay, so you always kept it in the red shed? No, it's been around. It's been in the barn. It's been in the shop. The last time I saw it was on the grass. Okay, so you did not know where it was. He said, I did. I thought it was on the grass. I saw it. I moved it into the red shed. So you set it on the right-hand side, I think, he said. Okay. Any other rakes in the red shed? He said, I don't think so. Okay, and then there's a sweep auger, the wagon. She starts going through things. The fertilizer tanks on top of that. Okay, and so when you and Tristan were working, you guys didn't have music on, you didn't hear anything, right? No trucks, nothing. He said, maybe I heard some semi-trucks going down the road. She said, so okay, you can hear some trucks there, but you go to the hospital and your family starts showing up, right? Her parents, step-parents, your sister, your friends, your family. Everyone asks what happens, right? Her dad, he goes, I don't even know. She fell in the corn rake. That's what I thought. I don't know. I sent my son to find her. And then Deputy Thompson, he told you, you talked to him, you told him Amy was dizzy. Yes. Deputy Thompson, You said you told him you were with Tristan the whole time, and you keep saying, I want to see how this happened, right? You don't say, wait, I have cameras, let's go see if they're working. Why wouldn't you say that? Which is absolutely true. Okay, when talking to Luke Thompson, was on the farm, and it was just you and Tristan the whole time, right? Yes. Okay, so then Deputy Thompson and Sheriff LeClaire, you talked to them for a few hours, and you still don't think about the cameras, right? But inside the shed the next day, you thought of it, right? And he said, oh, well, a family friend reminded me, and I thought about it, and that's when I saw that the antennas were on the ground and it didn't record. And she said, really? Okay, so you still thought at this time it was an accident, even though she was on her hands and knees and a corn rake out of her back? And then you spoke to John Turbid on 11/16. You had an interview, and you were saying how you're such a great dad, right? And how you love the house and farming. Initially, you had a great marriage, you said, and you didn't even, eventually you told him about the first affair, but then you were able to work it out and great things, it's great. And Jerry Frazier was brought up, and how your relationship with him was, and you said great. And Amy's relationship with Jerry, you said it was good, it was business mostly. You did not bring up what happened, right? But then, you heard him tell what happened, right? And when you saw the phone bills, you told him just keep it professional, and you put it past you. You weren't concerned about rumors that came out in August. You were consumed with everything, from planning the funeral. You were upset. You were thinking about the accident. Agent Turbid says this is a homicide, and you respond, and your response, you're responsible. You killed Amy, and you acted like it was the first time hearing it. But if someone told you the first time, wouldn't you have said something? And he said, I was dumbfounded. Okay, so someone came to the farm and killed her yards away from you, under your nose, right? Yes. And now Amy was stabbed with that corn rake 2 times or 3 times. Yes. Okay, and there were search warrants, and they asked to see it. And Todd, they said, this is a homicide. But you're in shock, right? Yes. And you just want to be there. You just want to do this for Amy, right? But you don't remember to ask about any other suspects. No, they want... Oh, okay. Do you remember if they asked about any other suspects? And he said, no, they didn't. They just wanted to blame me. Do you know today who would want to do this? And he said, no. And she said, Amy had a lot of friends. And he said, no, not a lot, but she had friends. Could you think of anyone? No. Terry Stainer was one of Amy's friends, and you liked her, right? Yes? You told Terry about your suspicions about Jerry, and then she told you about rumors, and then you told her about the rumors that Amy told you about in August, correct? And Todd, you had a flip phone, so you can't search on your own, correct? And Amy had her own email, correct? Yes. Okay, and you had a laptop in your house, 3 Kindles, kids had phones, your iPad? Yes. And, okay, you volunteered to get the iPad, and it was in your mom and dad's at a tractor, so you asked your brother Mike to get it, right? Actually, your sister Lynn called Mike to get the iPad, and then he hands it to a deputy. Is that what happened? I said, yes. They were talking about the Gmail account, and then the wedding dresses and the Pinterest, but there are some that you looked through, right? Some that you did about hunting and combines and stuff like that, yes. And then you looked up Jerry Frazier's address, didn't you? Yes, and things about menopause. And you had a flip phone, so you couldn't search. So you had to use your iPad or your computer. And then whose email is connected to the computer? And he said, I don't know. And then there were searches for killing in ancient times. He said that was from documentaries. You searched boys being raised like pussies. He assumed Amy did that because Wyatt was being bullied. Okay. And then characteristics of cheating women. He said, I have no idea. Ancient cultures and infidelity, no idea who did that. 16 facts about cheating women, no idea. But you remember Thrill of the Kill, Thrill of the Hunt? He said, yes. He did look that up. It was in a movie, and it was an Ernest Hemingway quote. What about the bio dad how to make sure your kids are yours. Amy had her children, they came out of her, right? You're saying that you don't remember those, that you didn't do those? And he said, no. And then you suspected an affair, okay, with Jerry in mid-July, and that was from the phone bills. And you heard in this courtroom that that started in May, right? And look, you have searches, what happens to cheaters in history, once a cheater, always a cheater, killing, cheating. So you thought that she was having an affair, right? And then you confronted Jerry and you asked him because of the phone bills, right? Yes. And then when Jerry and Amy told you no, nothing was going on, but you were still a bit unsure, so you spoke to his wife, correct? And about a month later, Amy told you about rumors, right? And asked you where that would have started, right? But you were okay with that, you were good. And then there were searches for how long to survive without food and water in extreme cold and fire, and we were all helping Taylor, he said, and heat stroke and burns and chest wounds and skin cold clammy. It was a hunter's safety course, and they were questions on a test. And when he said questions on a test, it would be so easy to pull up the test for whatever course that is, but it's never mentioned. And she said, is that an online, where is that course? He said, it's an online course, but never about checking the curriculum, right? On 11/6, she went for a simple procedure, right? And what happened then? He said, we voted and we went to the hospital, but Taylor was asking a lot of questions about the surgery. And so that's why they were looking up those organs and stuff. That's why that search was done. Okay, she was answering Taylor's questions. So then she says, okay, let's go back to the 911. You performing CPR on Amy as she was seated in the passenger seat with the seat down, is that correct? Yes. And you were using your mouth or just compressions? He said just compressions. And where was Tristan at this time? He said he was standing by the road. And so you were doing this alone. You were holding your phone and doing chest compressions? He said no, he's holding his phone with his elbow. Okay, at this point, you don't think Amy's cheating, right? Even in the months that you said she was moody? He said no. And you had a lot going on, right? She had a lot going on. That's what you said, right? Her grandma, her uncle, you said she was gone for 30 days and 2 months. And things were a little tense at home? And he said no. And she said, well, he said, I thought she was just, upset and needed help. So I guess there was some tension. And then you were calling Eileen, right? And you were telling her that this is hard and you need help. And your family, because they're helping, right? But you're not thinking about her cheating, right? You forgot about that, right? You forgot about Jerry, right? That wasn't a worry of yours. Not one worry about her cheating, right? Correct. No worries about it. You were thinking only about getting and helping your wife, right? Yes. You would do anything for her. Yes, right? Okay. You were thinking and you were trying to get her to come back. Yes. How long were you doing chest compressions before Deputy Thompson comes and takes over? And he says, not long, about 1 or 2 minutes. And then she plays a clip of this. And she says, what did you whisper? And he said, I couldn't hear. And she said, cheating whore? And he said, no. And she plays another clip. And she said, what did you say there? And he says, I didn't hear anything. And she said, did you say, go to hell, cheating whore? And she gives him the times of this. And she said, it sounds like you said cheating whore, go to hell, cheating whore, correct? And then she says nothing further. Then the redirect comes, and they said, Todd, the state asked you if you and Amy, if you asked Amy to quit the hospital after the first affair. Is that true? How did she do that? What'd she do? And he said she did it through a Facebook announcement, and she had a party at a barn. Okay, and when you and Tristan did not see the pet carrier, what were you thinking? And he said, well, maybe she didn't even attempt to get it. And so there was a series of questions. Where was Amy located in the shed? And the advisement of not removing something, right? He said, yeah, but did you feel you had no choice? He said, yes. And when you last saw that Okay, so he starts to ask him just about like the corn rake and why would it be in the shed, and there's other things in the shed that you don't know about, and some things get moved there, right? So he goes over that a little bit. And then he says, Todd, why did you search for Jerry Frazier and his wife? And he said, I was trying to find contact information for Jerry's wife. And what about Thrill the Kill? What was that about? He said, well, he was looking at that because he recognized that quote. It was in a movie. It's an Ernest Hemingway quote, and he thinks the movie was Predators. Okay. And so did you have any doubt about that being the bio father of your children? No. Did you search for anything about that? No. Okay. And were you convinced when you called that there was no affair? And he said, well, no, he was very convinced that there was no affair, but there was a little something, and that's why he called the wife, and then he was very convinced that there was no affair. Okay, and you knew when you were calling 911, you were on a recorded line, correct? Yes. Did you whisper anything then, like that? No. But you were frantic, yes? You were doing everything you could to keep her alive? Yes. The prosecution comes back and says, what about this search, how to tell a child is yours? Amy gave birth. Those children came out of her body, correct? Okay? You said you did not think that they were having an affair, but when you texted Terry, you said, is she acting like before? Like when she was having an affair is what you meant, right? Yes. Okay. And you called his wife to see if she suspected anything, correct? Yes. All right, so then the prosecution says, you're doing everything to keep her alive. Then the prosecution came back and said, Amy gave birth to those children, right? But there's a search for how to tell a child is yours. Why would Amy do a search like that? These children came out of her body. You said you did not think they were having an affair, Jerry and Amy. But when you texted Terry, you asked if Amy was acting like before. Did you mean before when she was having an affair? Yes. And you called Jerry's wife to see if she suspected anything, correct? Yes. I think that was the end of her questions. Okay, and then the defense rested and they gave some jury instructions, and then there was closing arguments, okay? And so here's the closing. First, she opens up with the prosecution that Amy will not get to see her kids have another birthday, graduate from high school, get married, have grandchildren, all of that. And it's all because she was brutally murdered, okay, by the defendant. And the defendant is the only one with a motive to kill Amy. And she says, he didn't think all was hunky-dory. She told everyone she was afraid. Even the defendant said there was no one else that he could think of that would do this. Okay? He can't let her have half the farm. He can't let her take the kids. Has Carrie Kalin that text. So she waits until she has the procedure. And then, as you know, Carrie Kalin told you that there was a text from Amy saying, asking how she was, replying to how she was feeling after her procedure. She says, okay, things are tense. I don't know what will happen. Okay? And then we have emails from Jerry that she's going out to do chores on the farm. The defendant isolates Amy, sends her to the shed. Mystery attacker who knows she's in the shed, knows there is a corn rake in there. He knew it was in there. We know no one else on the farm was there. Also, the defendant doesn't hear anything. We're to believe someone did this. You would not hear Amy screaming, who got struck with this corn rake 2-3 times. He doesn't call 911 right away. He's a doer, remember? So he pulls it out, okay? And he thought it was an accident for 6 days. Okay, an accident? Okay, maybe for 1 day, but 6 days? And the police and the medical examiner knew it was not an accident and they knew it was a homicide, right? And then, I sent my son to find my wife. He's already telling his story then. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the 911 call and make the decision for yourself. Look at his actions, okay? After the cameras, there's nothing there. She goes on about, make your own, draw it from it, listen to those 911 calls. She gives them the times of them. She goes over that, everything that happened and how that Amy needs her voice to be heard. And Amy's voice was heard in this courtroom, and it was heard through the witnesses that came here and told the story. And Amy needs her voice to be heard. And the truth needs to come out, and it's up to the jury to make sure that Amy's voice is heard. And so it was a pretty strong closing. I think the 911 call and what was on there was very strong, and kind of came out of left field, right? But maybe if they had honed in on it, kept making someone make it clearer and clearer, and then play it again, I think it might have been more effective. Now the defense comes and they're closing, their defense closed was, he says, we don't try to deliberately mislead you. I just think that, we're trying to mislead you, but we don't try it deliberately. We're probably misleading you, but just rest assured, we're not doing it deliberately. I just think that whole statement just sounds bad, okay? We don't try to deliberately mislead you, but, and then he goes to this, I believe these are the notes. Okay, so he took notes during the state's opening statement, and he said that they said Amy's not happy, and that was prior to the affair with Jerry. Oh no, excuse me. Amy wasn't happy. She had a prior affair. Then Jerry and his wife were confronted in July, but that was not enough for Todd. So after he contacted them and after statements from her friends, he devised a calculated plan, and he goes over what happened. Then he says the doctor's lawyers don't buy it. So Amy told friends, they said the evidence is overwhelming. And Todd told you on the stand yesterday, he consistently told you what happened up to where we are. Up to now. Tristan, okay, he said then only took 2 times to go out of their sight for water, and the state wants you to believe that during this time, Todd ran all the way over there to the red shed. Then he murdered her, came all the way back, and got back to working, all in the time that Tristan got a drink of water, okay? So then he says that's what the state wants, okay? But he said he believes, the attorney, she was murdered, okay? It's not an accident. Nobody's saying she wasn't murdered. That they're all in agreement on that. It's, evident when you see the extent of her injuries. The state said Amy was scared of Todd. He said, well, it doesn't sound like that because she fessed up to her affair that she had 5 years ago. And when she left work, they want you to think she was forced to leave work. But when she left work, she had a party. She posted it on Facebook. And, for the next 4.5 years, if you listen to Todd, they were living the dream. Okay? And Todd had no warnings. Okay? And Amy wondered, what was Amy going to say, he said. She was saying this stuff to friends to justify her behavior. Okay? He said, what do we hear from others about Todd and from Amy herself? That he's a good dad, He's a good worker. And she's lunching. She's going on trips. She's going on tumbling vacations. She goes on a houseboat. You call her a prisoner? You call her scared? You call her controlled? That does not sound like it. Not to him. And then he says, and then Carrie Kalin, right? She says to Carrie Kalin, things are pretty tense around here. Okay, but things were tense. Todd had 3 kids at home. It was bad weather. His wife had surgery. And when I heard this, he's got crops in the field. I thought of Kenny Rogers' Lucille. You picked to find time to leave me, Lucille, right? 3 hungry children and the crops in the field. Okay. And then he said, Todd's mom snapped at Amy, and Amy told Todd, and then Todd defended her. Okay, Todd defended her. And the defense is not here to determine who murdered Amy. They're not here, okay? Not here for that at all. Nope. But look at the aerial photos. You know, and this is the second attorney. I don't know. Okay, this guy is not even that old. This guy has to be in his 50s, right? Okay, that's the new 30. But he says he doesn't know how to make a PowerPoint. He doesn't know how to use technology. Daddy Defense said he couldn't use technology either, right? What is wrong with these people? They should really go to I'm sure somebody on YouTube could help them. He defended Amy. He called the mom and he defended Amy. He said, you can't speak like that to her. That's not helpful, and you can't do that. Okay. I think they all know too. I think they just, but also, I don't know if this is a public defender. You think he's earlier? I don't know. Anyway, thanks, Alma. But this guy, if I was paying him to defend me and he got up there and said he didn't know how to use a PowerPoint, so he's not going to use the PowerPoint like the prosecution did. So I would be like, oh my gosh, really? What? Right? That sounds pretty bad. Okay. Yeah. Well, we lost because we didn't have the PowerPoint. Yeah. Yeah. But I think what he does, he's smart and sneaky. He knows the jury is overwhelmed with all of these instructions, right? He knows now they're thinking like, oh my gosh, now they went through that it's got to be this one, and if it doesn't fit, it's got to hit that one, and then I've got to ask myself this question, and it's this one. And so he goes on to say, just hang on. I'll tell you where that comes in. So he says, look at the aerial photos. Look at how the weather changed. How could this be calculated when Todd wasn't going to know the weather changed? His nephew was working that very same field that night. Todd didn't know it was going to be too cold to do that. Todd didn't know he was going to have to come back and do the pig barns instead. Okay? So that he's saying this is ridiculous. And here's another thing about this attorney. Anytime he starts to talk about stuff like this, did anybody notice this? His arms get crossed so tight and he rocks back and forth. And that's a liar. That's the body language of a liar. That, you think he would have learned that? Like he would have had a coach there? Or like somebody at the table, like he'd say, okay, every time I cross my arms, just give me a sign. You know, and then just, right? Because she'd be like, oh my gosh, he's crossing his arms again. Yeah, but Sharon, you've got to be aware. I do it too, but you've got to be aware, like when you're there, because it is body language that's, you know, somebody at that table should have just, okay, we'll give you the sign again if we see you crossing your arms. Okay. So then, but and you can see, like, when he has his arms uncrossed, but then when he's trying to explain something that's just crazy, like why, say, Todd would pull the corn rake out of her back and not just call 911, right? It goes to that. And why wouldn't he pull that corn rake out of her? He's a doer. Okay, it's crazy. So it is his first trial? I don't think so. If you think he's a late bloomer, then what, did he just graduate from? Okay, so he says he's trying to explain how Todd couldn't have calculated this. And then he said, you know what? Those shed doors were frozen open, right? You think someone could have hid in that shed and Amy just surprised them? And then, hey, a murder mystery is, but it's possible. It's possible to murder mystery. Possible. Then he says, and then they say he pulled the fork out, but he couldn't get her out of the shed. And then I was writing here, call 911 with all these exclamation points, right? Call 911. Horrible situation, he says. It's horrible, okay? But you saw what he wanted to do. He wanted to even get her closer to that hospital. He was telling the 911 operator, I can get her closer, okay? But they said, no, pull over, let the ambulance come to you, okay? And he says, regarding those 911 whispers, and listen, I listened to them, and I have it in my new video, but I listened to the one at the trial, and I can hear it. Okay, so he says, regarding the 911 whispers, he said he's out of breath. And he tells the deputy, she's cold. He goes, who would say that other stuff on a 911 call that he knows is recorded? Okay? And let's see. He said, this is just a Hail Mary pass by the state. Okay? He's not saying that. And then he was criticized for saying it was an accident. He didn't know. And the Google searches, 2,945 of them. Some are what the state says. Cheating people, Aztecs, he went on. But who is engaged in naturally thinking what is on the internet? Oh, this didn't make a lot of sense at all. He said, who would be engaged in actually thinking about what is on the internet about this type of stuff except the person who is cheating? What? That doesn't make any sense, Mr. Defense there. He thinks Amy would be the one that made these searches, okay? He said the state discounts what Tristan said, but Tristan is a solid kid. He says the same thing from the get-go. He talks about how he was in the courtroom but went to the pop machine, the attorney says. He says, I guess the woman at his table, I don't know what her name was, she the one that should have told him to uncross his arms, but she didn't. So let's just call her Lori, okay? He said if Lori said she was in the courtroom with me all day, but then I went to the soda machine, he calls it a pop machine, to the pop machine for a minute, she might not say that. She might consider that she was with me all day because I was only gone for a minute to the pop machine. And then let's see here. He says, the doctors then come back, and Thompson and Cruz, they say this is no accident, okay? And they did a good job, he said. They did their job. There was nothing wrong with that. It was murder and not an accident. That was correct. And he said he's too old. He can't do the PowerPoint, okay? And he said this is where I think he used that. He wanted to hope that the jury is lazy. And he says, you don't even have to bother analyzing those points that the state went over and the judge, all that stuff. You don't even have to do that if you think Todd didn't do it. You're all, it's it, done deal. Don't have to worry about it at all. And somebody might be thinking like, yeah, well, we don't have to even bother with any of that if Todd's not guilty. So yeah, I think he definitely did that, right? To say, all right, do you really want to go through all those points? Well, if Todd's not guilty, we don't have to do any of that. Okay. All right, and we can get out of here. That's exactly what it seemed like he was doing to me, okay? So he said, if you don't think Todd did it, you don't go through any of that. There's nothing to analyze. And he said that, listen, Todd couldn't get a word in edgewise with that investigator. Did you hear how he was talking over him? And Todd kept saying, you're asking me to admit something I didn't do, and that investigator doesn't consider that a denial, okay? He said the agent even lied about having a recording of a fight in the kitchen that morning between Amy and Todd. And the agent just would not stop talking. He would not stop going to Todd and telling him that he did this. And he said, Todd got criticized for being a super dad? What was he going to do? She was gone for 30 days out of 2 months. This is just grasping by the state. And so he said on November 10th, Amy was viciously and deliberately murdered. Your job is to listen to the facts, look at the exhibits. You only need to decide if Todd did it. It's obvious she was murdered. So he goes over the events of the day again, and he talks about the hog barns. Amy wants to do something. She follows them out there, okay? They all have their own tasks. He shows the barn. He describes where they were. He takes a lot of time doing this. Okay, he shows the different views. He shows where the water hose was. He shows the office. He shows the garage. He shows where the pet carrier is supposed to be. And he says the door was wide open on the red shed. Okay, Tristan and Todd knew she had a medical procedure. They noticed her weakness, her unsteadiness. Terry Stainer told you, but remember Terry went back to work that very day? Amy took it easy for several days after that procedure. Todd told her to go back in the house, but he said if you want to help, you could get the pet carrier. They worked 1 hour, maybe a little longer. There was no pet carrier there, so Tristan goes and he makes the horrible discovery, okay? But now, they want to pick apart that he, started taking her to the hospital before he called 911, right? And he's not whispering terrible things, okay? Todd and Tristan are consistent, he said, except for the time he was getting a drink. He was not eyeball to eye. They were not eyeball to eyeball, okay? And where did this investigation go off the tracks? He says, well, it was when Todd said she fell. He wasn't thinking of murder. So it's like you second guess something. You're a Monday morning quarterback. So unusual. Is it so unusual to assume she fell? Murder's the thing that doesn't make sense. But, let's see. What did I say here? Oh, but it does not equate to Todd guilty of first-degree murder. When the medical proof showed it wasn't an accident, he became the only suspect. They gathered evidence that fits their subject. They didn't look at anything else. They didn't look at the fingernails. No, that's what he said. And Hemostath talks about what he did. He says searches are done by Todd. All the searches are done by Todd. That's not true. Searches for wedding dresses, diamond rings, tattoos, not done by Todd. Physical evidence, there isn't much. The rake handle, we both agree. We agree with the state. That would already have Todd's fingerprints on it because he pulled it out of her. The fingernails never examined, even though she had defensive wounds to both hands. But they didn't go that because it didn't fit their theory, okay? Not driven by the facts of the case is what's said. Why not? Okay, and he said it undermined their theory of their case. Don't do it. They said no damage to the nails. But if you garden or you work in your car, you can have no damage to your nails and have dirt and stuff underneath them, he said. The photos showed no injuries to Todd's body. Okay? And ruling out Frazier, they used cell phone pings, he said. None around towers around the Mullis farm. They didn't, makes no sense. So he's saying, find cell phone pings around the farm. But he's not saying from Jerry. He's saying that he thinks that they could get pings to see if anybody else, like this random murderer, is around. But it doesn't work. They have the number first. Okay. So yeah, that was just crazy. Okay. And then he said, think about the things Amy said, right? We are very aware of Amy's affair, and Patricia only met Todd 2 times, okay? Jerry Frazier had a wonderful day in court. It was a wonderful day in court for him, okay? But he may, what did he say this? He may have had different ideas. He was backing away from Amy, and Amy said she could do this herself. Eileen Fuller, 2.5 years later after the affair, okay, that's when Todd says, I am going to work this out because I don't want to lose my farm. That's his intention. That's 2.5 years after that affair. And then he said, Amy was making Todd seem bad. It was an excuse for her behavior. That's why she's fooling around. He said, Amy was just not satisfied. 4.5 years of what Todd felt was normal, besides the little hiccup with Jerry, okay? But then the rumors, Terry said, generated that phone call to the friend at the hospital, okay? And Amy talked to Todd about the rumors. Changes during the 4.5 years, they put in another barn, they bought that timber and that land, they had plans for the cabin, right? The state concedes that Amy did some of the searches, okay? She had access to Google account with Todd's name. And then he said, let's see, boys raised like pussies, research psychology. There's very legit connections to those. Michael Krogman told Tristan to tell the truth, okay? And let's see. The cameras, there's no recordings. They were knocked over. It's common sense is one of your tools that you can use for this case. The search for body organs, Todd told you he was helping Taylor understand, but it's not plausible to the state's theory. Right about the rumor search, look, their search for bipolar, and then the hunter's safety, Jerry's address, the swimming, the Ohana tattoos, the beer bread, the dominoes in Florida. He said, if that man is diabolical enough to murder and send his son to find her, he said, do you think you judge? There's no doubt he's not that man. Who did it? I don't know. He has no one to suggest, but it wasn't Todd. It was not Todd. And then he ends with, fine. Where am I? Oh yeah, here we go. The state's case is like a new car, right? It looks great on the outside, but when you try to take a test drive, they tell you you can't test drive that car, right? It's not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. No. Do justice and find him not guilty. Okay, that was the cats. Yeah, that was the closing, and then the rebuttal closing. She said they want you to believe Amy's friends are all lying. They just want the defendant to go down. These friends just want the defendant to go down. It's all a big conspiracy. Okay? She said, but if it was, wouldn't they say the exact same thing? Wouldn't their stories be better and align themselves more? Amy wasn't lying. She had no reason to lie. She was telling people she was having an affair. She did not tell them she didn't tell them anything for excuses. If Todd thought she wasn't having an affair, why did he text Terry Stainer that everyone was lying to him? He's told someone that, see, this part right here makes a lot of sense for me, okay? He's told someone came onto his property and viciously murdered his wife, and he does not react. Well, he doesn't even take any precautions, right? If he really thought someone came on there and viciously murdered her, now he's trying to say, well, 6 days, he thought it was still an accident until they said something. But even 6 days after that, wouldn't he be scared to death if he thought somebody came on the farm and viciously murdered her, who he has no idea who it was, right? So, oh my gosh, let's get the kids off here. Let's get a better security system. I think, we better have better cameras. Oh, really? Their lack of creativity today? Yeah, they're losing it. So, right? Anybody is listening to me? It doesn't add up. He needs to replace the batteries in the calculator. Yeah, I just don't know. So that really hits home. I mean, if that hits home for the jury, if someone really the only evidence points to him, but it's easy to say I found her like that. Oh, you're listening. Okay. You're late. So yeah, I mean, it really is. Because think about it. If you are, put anyone in there, someone murders your spouse or someone at your house, and you truly didn't do it. At first you think it's an accident, and then they tell you, no, it's murder. Right? Wouldn't you be like, oh my gosh, who murdered her? It's like OJ, right? I'm going to find the real killer. I'm going to find him. But OJ didn't even live there, okay? Where she was killed. But it's like, there's so many of them that did that if it wasn't them, it would mean there's like some vicious person coming around killing their family, and they don't do anything. So it's crazy, right? So, okay. So then, let me see here. So they said he doesn't react. And then Tristan did not want to be here, okay? The amount of time he was here, she goes, the amount of time did not change. It changed, hold on a minute. She said the amount of time did change from saying he wasn't away to he was away 1 minute and 45 seconds to I don't know. So she's saying the son is covering up for the dad, okay? Keeps changing because he's coming to terms with the truth. All right. He wants things to go back to the way they were, but they never can be because his mother's dead. Okay? Todd thought accident. He didn't remember the cameras. He did searches for things like buoyancy, and then he has an excuse for every one of those things. He always has an excuse. But he can't admit to Google searches about infidelity. Look at the ones within minutes of the searches for things like hunting bows and combines. So she's saying, look at the time that he's searching for the combine and look at the searches right within minutes of that. And you'll know who did the searches. And then she says in the 911 tape, 6:53 and 7 o'clock, You determine what it says. They say he is excited. Yeah, he's excited because he carried out a murder. He took the corn rake and he stabbed his wife, and now he's in cover-up mode. Okay? This is not a Hail Mary. We don't need a Hail Mary, she said. This is just another piece of evidence, adds to everything else. Follow the evidence, John Turbot, the interviews, search warrants. 3.5 months they investigated this. It all pointed to the defendant. This was cold, calculated plan. This did not all just happen. The defense wants you to think it's all happenstance. It's all coincidence. It's all... She said the 911 call, the defendant talks about falling on the corn rake. He is telling his story from the beginning. The fingernails, there was no analysis because they were short and intact, and the injuries on the top of the hands, there was no evidence anyone attacked her from the front. Only person that knows that is the defendant because he was there. He murdered her. Okay? The affair had been put to bed. Great. Defense wants you to believe that. She says the days before the procedure, Jerry met Amy for oral exams. The defendant knew the Google searches. She says he was pretending the marriage was perfect. Though September and October, she was gone for half of that time, and he doesn't mind. Who would send a 13-year-old to find his mother? Someone who was planning and plotting this. We had to make it look like it was an accident. He had to make it look like it was an accident. If he did it right, and only he didn't stab her 2 times. They talk about a test drive, that we won't give you a test drive. That's false. All evidence points to the defendant. All evidence, the defense wants you to think all evidence is happenstance. So she said that Amy was planning on leaving. She was storing furniture. She was telling people. It just so happens that Todd is telling Eileen he is frustrated about everything, and he told her about the affair, told Tristan that he had a convo and conversation with him, and Tristan comes from school. Tristan and Todd says she's talking to some guy. Then she has her procedure, and it just so happens, okay, that Tristan, Todd, and Amy are out in the barn, and it just so happens that Amy gets dizzy. Not once, not twice, but then Tristan says, you know, it would be helpful for us if you would go get the pet carrier. If you're not too dizzy, get the 15-pound pet carrier. And we're supposed to believe that some mystery attacker walks on to this Mullis farm at that very time, and he goes into that red shed and he sees the corn rake, and it just so happens that no one hears a thing, and it just so happens, okay, he's a really good murderer, okay? He leaves behind no evidence, nothing. And then it just so happens that Todd and Tristan have this conversation about the pet carrier, and that Todd sends Tristan out to the shed, and that the defendant runs to the shed, and then he pulls the rake, and then he calls 911 and says she fell. He doesn't remember the cameras. He doesn't remember. He just says the cats got the cameras. The next day the cameras were on. The Google searches, the infidelity and killing cheating wives. Okay? He was told that this was a murder, and he had no response. He must be the unluckiest man in the world. So she says, I have proved by witnesses' testimony beyond a reasonable doubt, clearly proven the defendant's guilt. Okay? Beyond a reasonable doubt. All evidence supports it. Justice demands it. Find the defendant guilty. Over. Just same old, same old. It's in the jury's hands now. I mean, I didn't find anything very, very strong in the defense. I mean, I just don't think his defense team was really demonstrative, or I don't think either of them were that, you know, like, have these great show-stopping. They're not like Rick Hubbard in the Jones case. I mean, that was a really, really great closing, but still, it's in the jury's hands. I think that 911 call, I'd like to hear what you all think about that. But this has been like a really long day, and I've listened to all of this. I will go over this. This is like a quick synopsis, but I'm going to be going over it again and again, like in the live, and we'll talk about it. But I just wanted to get a synopsis out in one video, and I know this is like crazy, probably all discombobulated, but it's like a information dump, I think.